Hey everyone, tonight we're diving into a story that's been hiding in plain sight across the American landscape for over 1,000 years. Scattered throughout the heartland of North America stand monuments so massive, so precisely engineered, that they rival the greatest architectural achievements of the ancient world. Yet most people have never heard of them. We're talking about earthen pyramids built by Native American civilizations, structures that once dominated skylines from Louisiana to Ohio, from Alabama to Illinois. These aren't small ceremonial mounds. These are genuine pyramids, some larger at their base than the Great Pyramid of Giza itself. So grab something comfortable to drink, settle in, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, and let's journey back to a time when the American continent was home to some of the most ambitious construction projects in human history. Picture this. You're standing in what is now southern Illinois, but the year is 1050 CE. Stretching before you is a massive urban center, unlike anything you've ever imagined existing in pre-Columbian North America. Towering above the landscape is a colossal earthen pyramid, rising 100 feet into the sky. Its base covers 13 acres, making it roughly the same size as the Great Pyramid of Giza. But this isn't Egypt. This is Cahokia, and you're looking at Monk's Mound, the largest pyramid north of Mexico. Around this central monument, the landscape is dotted with nearly 200 other earthen pyramids of varying sizes, their flat tops crowned with wooden temples and elite residences. Broad plazas stretch between the mounds, filled with thousands of people going about their daily lives. Canoes laden with trade goods navigate the nearby Mississippi River, carrying exotic materials from as far away as the Rocky Mountains and the Atlantic coast. This is a civilization at its peak, a sophisticated urban society that most people today have never heard of. The story of North America's lost pyramids begins not with mystery or speculation, but with hard archaeological evidence that has been accumulating for over a century. These structures weren't built by some unknown lost civilization or ancient aliens. They were constructed by Native American societies whose engineering prowess and organizational capabilities were nothing short of extraordinary. Let's start with the numbers, because they're genuinely staggering. Monk's Mound at Cahokia contains over 22 million cubic feet of earth. To put that in perspective, archaeologists estimate that building this single structure required moving more than 43 million individual baskets of soil. Every single basket carried by hand from earth, borrow pits to the construction site. The precision involved in this process was remarkable. When modern researchers examined the mound's construction, they found no evidence of erosion or vegetation layers between the building phases, indicating that the entire project proceeded according to a carefully planned timeline executed by skilled engineers. But Monk's Mound wasn't built from just any soil. The builders deliberately selected colored earth from locations hundreds of miles away. Blue clay from Indiana, red soil from the southern Appalachians, white gypsum powder from northern regions, all transported to the construction site and layered in specific patterns throughout the mound. This wasn't random. This was intentional, symbolic, and it required trade networks spanning half the continent. The scale of organization needed for such a project rivals anything achieved by ancient civilizations anywhere in the world. At its peak around 1100 CE, Cahokia housed an estimated 20,000 people in its urban core, with tens of thousands more living in surrounding settlements throughout the American bottom floodplain. This wasn't a village or a town. This was a genuine metropolis, complete with residential districts, craft workshops, administrative centers, and those magnificent pyramids serving as both religious temples and symbols of political power. But Cahokia wasn't alone. Across eastern North America, Native American societies were engaged in pyramid construction on a massive scale. Some of these projects began thousands of years before the more famous pyramids of Egypt or Central America. In northern Louisiana, at a site called Watson Break, Native Americans were building connected earthen mounds as early as 3,500 BCE. That's over 5,000 years ago, making these among the oldest monumental architecture in the Americas. The engineering challenges involved in these projects were immense. Unlike stone pyramids, which could be built using quarried blocks, earthen pyramids required moving and shaping millions of cubic feet of soil, using only human labor and woven baskets. The builders had to understand soil composition, drainage, structural stability, and long-term weathering. They had to coordinate the labor of thousands of workers over multiple generations. They had to maintain quality control across decades of construction. Consider the Poverty Point site in Louisiana, built between 1700 and 1100 BCE by hunter-gatherer societies. This complex features 6 massive concentric earthwork ridges that, if straightened and laid end to end, would stretch for nearly 8 miles. The largest mound at the site, known as Mound A, stands 72 feet tall and contains nearly 2 million cubic yards of soil. What makes this even more remarkable is that it was built by mobile societies who didn't practice agriculture. These were people constantly on the move, following seasonal resources, yet they managed to coordinate one of the most ambitious construction projects in prehistoric North America. The precision of these earthworks becomes even more impressive when you examine their astronomical alignments. At the Newark Earthworks in Ohio, Hopewell culture builders created geometric forms so precisely aligned with lunar cycles that modern astronomers consider the complex twice as accurate as Stonehenge. The octagonal earthwork there tracks the Moon's 18.6-year orbital cycle with remarkable precision, demonstrating sophisticated mathematical and astronomical knowledge. This wasn't accidental. The builders understood celestial mechanics well enough to encode complex astronomical observations into permanent earthen monuments. They created what were essentially massive Stone Age observatories using nothing but human labor and an intimate understanding of the natural world. The Serpent Mound in Ohio represents yet another type of earthwork engineering. This quarter-mile-long effigy mound follows the contours of an ancient meteor impact crater, suggesting the builders understood and incorporated geological features into their ceremonial landscape. The serpent's curves align with solstices and equinoxes, creating a calendar written across the landscape in earth and grass. These weren't isolated achievements by individual communities. The similarities in construction techniques, geometric proportions, and astronomical alignments across sites separated by hundreds of miles indicate shared knowledge systems and cultural connections spanning vast distances. At Hopewell sites across Ohio, archaeologists have found that square earthworks, scattered dozens of miles apart, all measure precisely 1,080 feet on each side. This level of standardization suggests sophisticated surveying techniques and shared architectural traditions. The trade networks supporting these pyramid-building cultures were equally impressive. Artifacts found at major mound sites include copper from the Great Lakes region, mica from the Appalachian Mountains, obsidian from the Rocky Mountains, and marine shells from both the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic coast. These materials traveled thousands of miles through networks of rivers, trails, and human relationships to reach the construction sites. The coordination required to maintain such extensive trade relationships while simultaneously managing massive construction projects speaks to levels of social and political organization that challenge traditional assumptions about prehistoric North American societies. Moundville in Alabama exemplifies the urban complexity of these pyramid-building cultures. At its height between 1000 and 1450 CE, the site featured 29 earthen pyramids arranged around a central plaza and enclosed by a defensive wooden palisade. The largest mound, known as Mound B, rises 58 feet above the plaza and provided the foundation for elite residences and ceremonial buildings. The community supported between 1,000 and 3,000 residents within the palisaded area, with another 10,000 people living in the surrounding valley. The construction techniques used at these sites reveal sophisticated engineering knowledge. Builders understood how to create stable foundations in floodplain environments, how to manage drainage to prevent erosion, and how to construct access ramps and terracing systems that could support heavy wooden structures on the mound summits. They developed standardized basket sizes for earth transport, quality control systems for soil selection, and project management techniques that kept massive construction efforts on schedule across multiple decades. What's perhaps most remarkable is how these achievements have been overlooked or misunderstood in popular consciousness. When European settlers first encountered these monuments in the 18th and 19th centuries, many refused to believe that Native Americans could have built them. This racist assumption led to the creation of elaborate alternative theories involving lost races, ancient visitors, or mysterious civilizations that supposedly preceded Native American occupation of the continent. These myths persisted well into the 20th century, obscuring the genuine achievements of the societies that actually built these monuments. It's only in recent decades that archaeologists and Native American communities have worked together to document and interpret these sites properly, revealing the true scope of indigenous architectural and engineering capabilities. The temporal scope of pyramid building in North America spans over 4 millennia, from the earliest mounds at Watson Break around 3500 BCE to the final construction phases at sites like Cahokia around 1200 CE. This represents one of the longest continuous architectural traditions in world history, involving dozens of distinct cultures across a continent-spanning region. Yet despite their age, scale, and sophistication, these monuments remain largely unknown to the general public. Unlike their stone counterparts in Egypt or Central America, earthen pyramids don't preserve as dramatically over centuries. Weather, vegetation, and human activity have softened their profiles, transforming angular pyramids into rolling hills that blend into the surrounding landscape. Many have been ploughed flat by centuries of farming. Others have been developed or destroyed by urban expansion, but the ones that survive tell an extraordinary story of human ambition, engineering skill, and cultural sophistication that rivals any achievement of the ancient world. The scale of these achievements becomes even more staggering when you consider the organizational challenges involved. Building a structure like Monk's Mound wasn't just about moving dirt. It required coordinating the labor of thousands of people across multiple generations, managing complex supply chains for specialized materials, and maintaining quality control standards that would impress modern construction managers. Archaeological evidence suggests that Cahokia's builders operated with military-level precision. Work crews were organized into specialized teams, each responsible for specific aspects of construction. Some groups focused on soil procurement, traveling hundreds of miles to quarry the colored clays that gave each layer its symbolic meaning. Others managed the basket relay systems that moved materials from borrow pits to construction sites. Still others specialized in the precise layering and compaction techniques that ensured structural stability. The logistics alone are mind-boggling. Feeding the workforce required coordinating agricultural production across the entire region. Housing temporary laborers demanded extensive residential construction. Tool production, from the countless baskets needed for earth transport to the wooden implements used for digging and shaping, represented entire industries dedicated to pyramid construction. But here's where it gets truly fascinating. Recent soil analysis has revealed that the builders didn't just select colored earth for symbolic reasons. They chose specific soil types based on their engineering properties. Clay-rich soils provided structural stability. Sandy soils improved drainage. Organic-rich earth created flexible layers that could accommodate settling without cracking. These weren't primitive people randomly piling up dirt. These were sophisticated engineers who understood soil mechanics at a level that wouldn't be matched in North America until the arrival of modern earth-moving technology. The Spiro Mound site in Oklahoma demonstrates another aspect of this engineering sophistication. Built between 850 and 1450 CE, the complex features 12 mounds of 3 distinct types, each designed for specific functions. Temple mounds provided elevated platforms for religious ceremonies. Burial mounds served as sacred repositories for elite burials. House mounds supported residential structures for the ruling class. The precise geometric relationships between these structures suggest the builders worked from detailed architectural plans, probably passed down through generations of specialized engineers. What sets these achievements apart from other ancient monuments is their integration with the natural landscape. Rather than imposing geometric forms on the environment, Native American builders created earthworks that enhanced and celebrated natural features. At the Serpent Mound, the builders followed the contours of an ancient impact crater, using geological formations that were already millions of years old as the foundation for their ceremonial landscape. This relationship with the natural world extended to astronomical alignments that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics. The Great Circle at Newark covers an area large enough to hold 4 Roman colosseums, yet its walls align with lunar standstill positions, accurate to within half a degree. The builders tracked celestial cycles spanning decades, encoding this knowledge into monuments designed to preserve and transmit astronomical information across generations. Consider what this means. These were societies that maintained observational records across multiple human lifetimes, developing mathematical relationships complex enough to predict celestial events years in advance. They created permanent monuments that functioned as both calendars and teaching tools, ensuring that essential knowledge would survive even if the oral traditions were disrupted. The economic implications of these projects were equally sophisticated. At Moundville, archaeological evidence shows that pyramid construction drove innovation in agriculture, crafts production, and long-distance trade. The need to feed large labor forces encouraged development of intensive farming techniques that increased crop yields dramatically. The demand for construction materials stimulated trade networks that brought exotic goods from across the continent. But perhaps most remarkably, these societies managed to coordinate massive construction projects while maintaining complex political relationships across vast territories. The Mississippian culture that built sites like Cahokia, Moundville, and Spiro represented a loose confederation of allied communities spanning much of eastern North America. They shared architectural traditions, artistic styles, and ceremonial practices while maintaining distinct local identities. This political sophistication becomes clear when you examine the distribution of pyramid sites across the landscape. Major centers were positioned to control river transportation routes, agricultural floodplains, and resource extraction areas. Smaller satellite communities provided agricultural surplus, raw materials, and labor for construction projects. The entire system functioned as an integrated economic and political network held together by shared religious beliefs and cultural practices centered on the sacred mounds. The religious significance of these pyramids cannot be overstated. Unlike Egyptian pyramids, which served primarily as tombs, North American earthen pyramids were living ceremonial centers. The flat-top platforms supported wooden temples, where priests conducted elaborate rituals marking seasonal cycles, agricultural festivals, and political ceremonies. These weren't monuments to dead pharaohs. These were active spiritual centers serving vibrant communities. Archaeological excavations have revealed the complexity of activities that took place on these platforms. At Cahokia's Grand Plaza, thousands of people gathered for ceremonies that combined religious ritual with political theatre. Elite burials found at various sites suggest that pyramid construction was closely linked to concepts of sacred kingship, with rulers literally elevated above their subjects on earthen thrones that connected them symbolically to the cosmic order. The artistic achievements associated with these sites rival those of any ancient civilization. Shell engravings from Spiro display sophisticated iconography depicting mythological scenes, astronomical observations, and political symbolism. Copperwork from Hopewell sites demonstrates metalworking techniques that produced objects of extraordinary beauty and craftsmanship. Ceramic traditions associated with pyramid sites show continuous innovation and artistic development spanning centuries. Yet for all their achievements, these societies remain largely invisible in popular understanding of American history. Part of this invisibility stems from the nature of earthen construction itself. Unlike stone monuments that preserve their angular profiles for millennia, earthen pyramids weather and erode, their sharp edges softening into gentle hills that blend with the surrounding landscape. Many have been ploughed flat by centuries of farming or destroyed by urban development. But the deeper issue is cultural bias that has consistently underestimated the capabilities of indigenous North American societies. When European explorers first encountered these monuments, they created elaborate alternative explanations rather than acknowledge Native American engineering achievements. These myths of lost races and ancient visitors persisted well into the 20th century, obscuring the genuine accomplishments of the people who actually built these remarkable structures. Modern archaeological techniques are finally revealing the true scope of these achievements. Ground-penetrating radar has identified previously unknown pyramid sites across the continent. Soil chemistry analysis has traced the sources of construction materials across thousands of miles. Computer modeling has revealed the sophisticated engineering principles underlying earthwork design. Perhaps most importantly, collaboration between archaeologists and Native American communities has brought indigenous perspectives to the interpretation of these sites. Rather than viewing them simply as archaeological curiosities, we're beginning to understand them as expressions of complex worldviews that integrated astronomy, agriculture, politics, and spirituality into coherent cultural systems. The temporal depth of this tradition adds another layer of complexity to the story. At Watson Break in Louisiana, radiocarbon dating has confirmed construction beginning around 3500 BCE, making these among the earliest monumental architecture in the Americas. The tradition continued for nearly 5 millennia, with the final major construction phases at Cahokia completed around 1200 CE. This represents one of the longest continuous architectural traditions in human history. Throughout this enormous span of time, the basic principles remained consistent even as specific techniques evolved. Builders always selected construction materials for both practical and symbolic properties. They consistently incorporated astronomical alignments into their designs. They maintained geometric proportions and standardized measurements across vast distances and extended time periods. This continuity suggests that pyramid building in North America wasn't just a construction technique. It was a fundamental expression of cultural identity that connected communities across space and time. Each generation inherited not just engineering knowledge, but spiritual and political traditions that gave meaning to the enormous effort required for these projects. The decline of these pyramid-building cultures around 1400 CE remains one of the great mysteries of North American archaeology. Climate change, warfare, political instability, and environmental degradation all likely played roles in the abandonment of major centers like Cahokia and Moundville. But the end of the tradition represents more than just the collapse of individual communities. It marks the conclusion of one of humanity's most remarkable experiments in monumental architecture. Today, recognition of these achievements is finally growing. UNESCO has designated several earthwork sites as World Heritage Sites, acknowledging their outstanding universal value to humanity. The Hopewell ceremonial earthworks in Ohio joined this prestigious list in 2023, taking their place alongside Stonehenge, the Great Pyramid of Giza, and the Great Wall of China as monuments of global significance. But these sites represent more than just historical curiosities. They're active reminders of sophisticated civilizations that understood principles we're only beginning to appreciate today. The builders of these pyramids developed sustainable construction techniques that worked with natural systems rather than against them. Their monuments have survived for millennia without concrete, steel, or modern engineering tools, testament to design principles that modern architects are studying with renewed interest. The construction techniques employed at these sites reveal levels of sophistication that challenge every assumption about prehistoric capabilities. At Poverty Point, soil analysis has shown that builders use different earth types in specific combinations to create structures that remain stable after 3,000 years. They understood drainage principles well enough to prevent erosion in flood-prone environments. They developed compaction techniques that created surfaces hard enough to support massive wooden structures without modern foundation systems. The precision involved in these projects becomes even more remarkable when you consider the tools available. Every cubic foot of earth was moved using woven baskets, wooden digging tools, and human labor. Yet the resulting structures exhibit geometric accuracy that rivals modern surveying. The Great Circle at Newark measures 1,200 feet in diameter with variations of less than 5 feet from perfect circularity. This level of precision required mathematical knowledge, surveying techniques, and quality control systems that would impress contemporary engineers. Archaeological evidence suggests that construction projects operated according to sophisticated project management principles. Work crews were organized hierarchically, with specialized roles for different aspects of construction. Master builders oversaw overall design and quality control. Skilled craftsmen managed technical aspects like soil selection and layering. Laborers handled the massive earth-moving operations under careful supervision. The entire system functioned with efficiency levels that allowed completion of enormous projects within planned timeframes. The Etowah Mounds in Georgia demonstrate another aspect of this organizational sophistication. Built between 1000 and 1550 CE, the site features 6 major mounds arranged according to precise geometric principles. The largest mound rises 63 feet above the surrounding plaza and required moving over 500,000 cubic feet of earth. But construction proceeded in carefully planned phases that allowed the community to continue normal activities while major building projects were underway. This integration of construction with daily life reveals sophisticated social organization that balanced monumental building with practical necessities. Communities had to maintain agricultural production, craft specialization, and trade relationships while dedicating enormous resources to pyramid construction. The fact that they succeeded in all these endeavors simultaneously speaks to administrative capabilities that rival those of any ancient civilization. The astronomical alignments found at these sites demonstrate mathematical and observational skills that were centuries ahead of their time. At Cahokia, researchers have identified multiple structures aligned with solstices, equinoxes, and complex stellar phenomena. The Grand Plaza itself appears to have functioned as a massive solar calendar, with specific positions marking important dates in the agricultural and ceremonial cycle. But these weren't just practical calendars. They were sophisticated instruments for tracking celestial cycles that spanned multiple human lifetimes. The builders understood precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis that shifts stellar positions over thousands of years. They incorporated this knowledge into monuments designed to remain accurate across geological timescales. The Cahokia woodhenge structures represent perhaps the most sophisticated astronomical instruments created in prehistoric North America. These circles of wooden posts functioned as precision observatories for tracking solar movements throughout the year. Multiple woodhenges were constructed and rebuilt over several centuries, each incorporating refinements that improved observational accuracy. The final versions achieved precision levels that weren't matched in European astronomy until the Renaissance. Consider what this means for our understanding of prehistoric intellectual capabilities. These societies maintained observational records across multiple generations, developing mathematical relationships complex enough to predict celestial events decades in advance. They created permanent monuments encoding this knowledge in forms designed to survive cultural disruptions and transmit essential information to future generations. The artistic achievements associated with these pyramid sites reveal aesthetic sensibilities and technical skills that rank among humanity's finest cultural expressions. The copperwork found at Hopewell sites demonstrates metalworking techniques that produced objects of extraordinary beauty and sophistication. Artisans developed specialized tools, advanced heating methods, and complex alloy formulations to create ceremonial objects that combined religious symbolism with technical innovation. Shell engraving traditions associated with Mississippian sites produced artworks of remarkable complexity and artistic merit. Craftsmen working with marine shells created intricate scenes depicting mythological narratives, astronomical observations, and political ceremonies. The level of detail achieved in these engravings rivals anything produced by contemporary civilizations anywhere in the world. Ceramic traditions show continuous innovation, spanning centuries of development. Potters experimented with clay formulations, firing techniques, and decorative methods to produce vessels that served both practical and ceremonial functions. The artistic styles associated with different pyramid sites reveal distinct regional traditions, while maintaining broader cultural connections across vast territories. The trade networks supporting these artistic traditions were equally sophisticated. Artisans working at major pyramid sites had access to raw materials from across the continent. Copper from the Great Lakes region traveled over 1,000 miles to reach workshops in Alabama and Georgia. Marine shells from the Gulf Coast were transported up the Mississippi River system to craft centers in Illinois and Ohio. Obsidian from the Rocky Mountains reached artisans working in the Southeast. This continental-scale exchange system required sophisticated logistics, standardized value systems, and diplomatic relationships that maintained peaceful trade across cultural boundaries. The fact that exotic materials reached pyramid sites consistently over periods spanning centuries indicates economic and political stability that supported long-term cultural development. The agricultural innovations associated with these societies were equally remarkable. The need to feed large populations concentrated around pyramid sites drove development of intensive farming techniques that dramatically increased crop yields. At Cahokia, archaeologists have identified sophisticated field systems, irrigation networks, and crop storage facilities that supported urban populations larger than many medieval European cities. These agricultural innovations weren't limited to individual sites. The Mississippian agricultural system spread across much of eastern North America, transforming regional economies and supporting population growth that made large-scale construction projects possible. The development of new crop varieties, improved farming tools, and advanced food processing techniques created agricultural surpluses that funded monumental architecture while supporting specialized craft production. The political systems that coordinated these achievements were remarkably sophisticated. The Mississippian culture represented a loose confederation of allied communities that maintained shared cultural practices while preserving local autonomy. This political arrangement allowed for large-scale coordination of construction projects and trade networks, while preventing the rigid centralization that often led to collapse in other ancient civilizations. Archaeological evidence suggests that political authority was closely linked to religious leadership and astronomical knowledge. Rulers, who could predict celestial events and coordinate ceremonial calendars, held legitimacy that transcended local boundaries. The pyramid platforms served as stages for political theatre that combined religious ritual with displays of wealth and power, designed to maintain social cohesion across diverse communities. But these weren't tyrannical despotisms. Evidence suggests that political authority was balanced by community councils, craft guild organizations, and religious societies that maintained checks on centralized power. The result was a political system that encouraged innovation and cultural development while maintaining stability across multiple centuries. The environmental management practices developed by these societies demonstrate ecological understanding that modern communities are struggling to achieve. Pyramid builders understood watershed management, soil conservation, and and sustainable resource extraction at levels that allowed them to support large populations without destroying the natural systems they depended on. At Poverty Point, researchers have identified sophisticated waste management systems, controlled burning practices, and resource rotation strategies that maintained environmental health while supporting intensive human occupation. These weren't accidental achievements. They represent conscious environmental planning based on deep understanding of ecological relationships. The decline of these remarkable civilizations around 1400 CE represents one of the great turning points in North American history. Climate change, particularly the onset of the Little Ice Age, disrupted agricultural systems that had supported large populations for centuries. Political instability, possibly triggered by environmental stress, led to warfare and social fragmentation that undermined the cooperative relationships essential for maintaining complex societies. Archaeological evidence from Cahokia shows clear signs of decline beginning around 1200 CE. Construction projects were abandoned mid-completion. Population began dispersing from urban centers to smaller, more defensible settlements. The elaborate trade networks that had supplied exotic materials for centuries began to collapse as political relationships deteriorated. But the end of these pyramid-building cultures didn't represent complete cultural collapse. Many of the societies encountered by European explorers in the 16th and 17th centuries were direct descendants of the pyramid builders. They maintained oral traditions, artistic styles, and religious practices that connected them to their monumental past even after the great construction projects had ended. The Cherokee, Creek, Choctaw, and other southeastern tribes preserved detailed knowledge of the ancient mound sites and continued to regard them as sacred locations long after active construction had ceased. These connections weren't just cultural memories. They represented living traditions that maintained spiritual and political significance across centuries of change. The Spanish explorer Hernando de Soto encountered several communities still actively using pyramid sites when he traveled through the southeast in the 1540s. His chroniclers described elaborate ceremonies conducted on mound platforms and political systems that clearly descended from the earlier Mississippian traditions. These accounts provide crucial links between the archaeological record and historical documentation of indigenous societies. But European contact brought devastating changes that accelerated the decline of these ancient traditions. Disease epidemics reduced native populations by up to 90% in some regions. Forced relocations disrupted the landscape connections that gave mound sites their cultural meaning. Missionary activities actively suppressed indigenous religious practices associated with the ancient earthworks. The systematic destruction and misinterpretation of these monuments represents one of the great cultural tragedies of American history. Thousands of pyramid sites were plowed flat by European settlers who saw them as obstacles to agricultural development rather than monuments worthy of preservation. Others were mined for construction materials or destroyed by urban development. Perhaps more damaging was the persistent refusal to acknowledge indigenous achievements. The mound builder myth, which attributed these monuments to vanished races rather than Native American ancestors, served to justify land seizure and cultural suppression by denying indigenous connections to the landscape. These racist interpretations dominated popular understanding well into the 20th century, obscuring the genuine accomplishments of the societies that created these remarkable monuments. Modern recognition of these achievements represents both scientific progress and moral reckoning with historical injustices. Archaeological research conducted in partnership with tribal communities has revealed the true scope of indigenous accomplishments while restoring cultural connections that were nearly severed by centuries of suppression and neglect. The designation of earthwork sites as UNESCO World Heritage locations acknowledges their global significance while providing protection for the surviving monuments. These recognitions place North American pyramid sites in their proper context as achievements that rank among humanity's greatest cultural expressions, deserving the same respect and protection accorded to monuments in Egypt, Europe, and Asia. Contemporary Native American communities maintain active relationships with these ancient sites, conducting ceremonies and educational programs that preserve cultural traditions while sharing indigenous perspectives with broader audiences. These efforts ensure that the monuments are understood not just as archaeological curiosities, but as expressions of living cultures that continue to evolve and adapt while maintaining connections to their ancestral achievements. The scientific techniques being applied to these sites continue to reveal new aspects of their sophistication and complexity. Ground-penetrating radar surveys have identified previously unknown structures buried beneath centuries of soil accumulation. LiDAR mapping has revealed subtle landscape modifications that extend far beyond the visible monuments. Soil chemistry analysis has traced construction materials to their sources thousands of miles away. Perhaps most remarkably, computer modeling based on archaeological evidence has allowed researchers to recreate the construction processes used to build these monuments. These simulations reveal the sophisticated planning, precise coordination, and technical innovation required to complete projects of such enormous scale using only human labor and simple tools. The implications of these discoveries extend far beyond archaeology. They challenge fundamental assumptions about human capabilities, social organization, and cultural development that have shaped academic understanding for generations. They demonstrate that sophisticated civilization developed independently in North America, achieving levels of complexity that rival any ancient society. But more than that, they reveal alternative models for sustainable development, environmental management, and social organization that offer insights relevant to contemporary challenges. These societies achieve prosperity and cultural sophistication while maintaining ecological balance across multiple centuries. Their approaches to urban planning, resource management, and political organization provide examples of sustainable development that modern communities are struggling to achieve. The story of North America's lost pyramids isn't just ancient history. It's a reminder of human potential, cultural achievement, and the importance of respecting indigenous knowledge systems that developed sophisticated solutions to universal challenges. These monuments stand as testimony to the ingenuity, ambition, and cultural sophistication of the Native American societies that created them, demanding recognition as achievements that belong among the wonders of the ancient world. The preservation of these sites represents one of the most urgent challenges facing American archaeology today. Unlike stone monuments that can withstand millennia of weathering, earthen pyramids are vulnerable to erosion, agricultural activities, and urban development. Many sites have already been lost forever, their ancient profiles flattened by decades of ploughing or buried beneath shopping centres and suburban developments. At Cahokia, for instance, the original complex included nearly 200 mounds of varying sizes. Today, fewer than 80 survive in recognizable form. The rest have been leveled by farming, road construction, or commercial development. This represents an irreplaceable loss of cultural heritage, destroying monuments that took generations to construct and encoded thousands of years of accumulated knowledge. The challenge of preservation is complicated by the subtle nature of many earthwork features. Unlike the dramatic profiles of Egyptian pyramids, North American earthen monuments often appear as gentle rises in the landscape that can be overlooked by casual observers. Their significance becomes apparent only through careful archaeological investigation that reveals the sophisticated engineering and cultural meaning embedded in their construction. Modern preservation efforts rely on advanced technology to document and protect these fragile monuments. Laser scanning creates precise three-dimensional models that capture exact dimensions and surface details. These digital archives ensure that accurate records survive, even if the physical monuments are damaged or destroyed. Ground-penetrating radar reveals subsurface features that help archaeologists understand construction techniques and identify previously unknown structures. But technology alone cannot solve the preservation challenge. Protecting these sites requires community engagement, legal protection, and public education that builds appreciation for their cultural and historical significance. Many of the most important earthwork sites are located on private property, making preservation dependent on landowner cooperation and government incentive programs. The economic value of these monuments as tourist attractions and educational resources is only beginning to be recognized. Cahokia Mounds. State Historic Site draws over 250,000 visitors annually, generating millions of dollars in economic activity for the surrounding region. Poverty Point National Monument has become a major attraction in rural Louisiana, bringing visitors from around the world to experience one of North America's most ancient architectural achievements. These economic benefits provide powerful arguments for preservation while creating sustainable funding sources for site maintenance and interpretation. As public awareness of these monuments grows, their value as cultural and educational resources becomes increasingly apparent to local communities and government officials. The interpretation of these sites has evolved dramatically as archaeologists have developed more sophisticated analytical techniques and established collaborative relationships with descendant communities. Early archaeological investigations often focused on artifact collection and basic site documentation without considering broader cultural contexts or indigenous perspectives on site significance. Contemporary archaeological practice emphasizes community-based research that incorporates tribal knowledge and cultural protocols into investigation and interpretation strategies. This collaborative approach has revealed aspects of site meaning and function that purely academic research would never have uncovered. Native American oral traditions provide crucial insights into the symbolic significance of specific landscape features, the cultural meaning of architectural arrangements, and the spiritual practices associated with different types of monuments. The results of this collaboration have transformed understanding of North American earthwork traditions. Rather than viewing these sites as archaeological curiosities from vanished civilizations, researchers now recognize them as expressions of living cultural traditions that continue to evolve and adapt while maintaining connections to their ancient foundations. This shift in perspective has important implications beyond archaeology. It challenges colonial narratives that portrayed North America as an empty wilderness awaiting European development, revealing instead a continent shaped by thousands of years of sophisticated human occupation and landscape management. The earthwork traditions represent clear evidence of indigenous innovation, environmental stewardship, and cultural achievement that demands recognition and respect. The educational potential of these sites extends far beyond their immediate archaeological significance. They provide powerful examples of alternative approaches to urban planning, sustainable development, and environmental management that offer insights relevant to contemporary challenges. The builders of these monuments achieved prosperity and cultural sophistication while maintaining ecological balance across multiple centuries, demonstrating sustainable practices that modern societies are struggling to implement. Students studying these sites learn about engineering principles, astronomical observation, agricultural innovation, and social organization through direct engagement with physical evidence of human achievement. The monuments serve as outdoor classrooms, where abstract concepts become tangible through examination of actual structures built by ancient engineers and architects. The artistic and cultural traditions associated with these sites provide equally valuable educational opportunities. Museum collections include thousands of artifacts that demonstrate the aesthetic sensibilities and technical skills of earthwork builders. Copperwork, shell carvings, ceramic vessels, and stone sculptures reveal artistic traditions that rank among humanity's finest cultural expressions. These artistic achievements aren't just beautiful objects to be admired in museum cases. They represent sophisticated symbolic systems that encoded religious beliefs, astronomical knowledge, and political relationships in visual forms designed to communicate across cultural and temporal boundaries. Understanding these symbolic systems provides insights into worldviews and knowledge systems that developed independently from old world traditions. The global significance of North American earthwork traditions becomes clear when they're compared with monumental architecture from other ancient civilizations. The Great Circle at Newark Earthworks covers more area than the Roman Colosseum. Monk's Mound contains more earth than the Great Pyramid of Giza. The Poverty Point complex demonstrates organizational capabilities that rival those of any prehistoric society anywhere in the world. But these comparisons, while impressive, miss the point of what makes these achievements truly remarkable. North American earthwork traditions developed unique solutions to universal human challenges, creating architectural and cultural innovations that have no parallels in other ancient civilizations. The astronomical alignments at Newark demonstrate mathematical sophistication that wasn't achieved in European astronomy until centuries later. The sustainable agriculture systems developed around major earthwork sites supported large populations without environmental degradation for over 1,000 years. The political systems that coordinated these achievements represent equally unique innovations. The loose confederations that built and maintained earthwork sites created models of cooperative governance that balanced centralized coordination with local autonomy. These political arrangements allowed for large-scale projects and extensive trade networks, while avoiding the rigid hierarchies that often led to collapse in other ancient civilizations. The decline of these political systems around 1400 CE represents a major turning point in North American history, but it wasn't the end of indigenous innovation and cultural development. Many of the societies encountered by European explorers maintained sophisticated political arrangements, agricultural systems, and artistic traditions that clearly descended from earlier earthwork cultures. The Cherokee Nation, for instance, maintained detailed knowledge of ancient mound sites throughout the Southeast and continued to regard them as sacred locations long after active construction had ceased. Creek and Choctaw communities preserved oral traditions that explained the cultural significance of specific earthwork features and maintained ceremonial practices associated with ancient monuments. These cultural continuities weren't just historical memories. They represented living traditions that adapted and evolved while maintaining connections to ancestral achievements. The architectural principles, astronomical knowledge, and agricultural techniques developed by earthwork builders continue to influence indigenous communities across centuries of cultural change. European contact disrupted, but didn't eliminate these traditions. Spanish chroniclers in the 16th century described elaborate ceremonies conducted on mound platforms and recorded detailed accounts of political systems that clearly descended from earlier Mississippian cultures. French explorers documented agricultural techniques and environmental management practices that had been refined over centuries of indigenous innovation. But colonial pressures gradually undermined the cultural and political relationships that had sustained these traditions. Disease epidemics reduced populations to levels that made large-scale cooperation difficult. Forced relocations severed connections between communities and the landscape features that anchored their cultural identity. Missionary activities actively suppressed indigenous religious practices associated with ancient earthworks. The systematic destruction of earthwork sites during the 19th and 20th centuries represents one of the great cultural tragedies of American history. Thousands of monuments were destroyed by agricultural and urban development, often with deliberate disregard for their historical significance. The mound builder myths that attributed these achievements to vanished races rather than Native American ancestors provided convenient justification for this cultural vandalism. Recovery from this destruction has been slow and incomplete. Many sites were so thoroughly destroyed that only fragmentary evidence remains of their original form and function. Others survive only as faint traces visible through aerial photography or ground-penetrating radar surveys. The loss of these monuments represents an irreplaceable diminishment of human cultural heritage. But surviving sites continue to provide crucial evidence of indigenous achievements while serving as focal points for cultural revitalization efforts within Native American communities. Tribal historic preservation programs work to protect remaining earthwork sites while documenting traditional knowledge associated with their construction and use. Educational initiatives bring tribal youth to ancient sites where they can connect directly with ancestral achievements. These efforts represent more than historical preservation. They're part of broader movements to revitalize indigenous cultures and assert tribal sovereignty over ancestral territories. The earthwork sites provide powerful symbols of indigenous innovation and environmental stewardship that challenge colonial narratives about American history and development. Contemporary Native American artists draw inspiration from earthwork traditions while creating new works that express modern indigenous identity. Sculptors, painters, and multimedia artists incorporate motifs and design principles from ancient monuments into contemporary artistic expressions that maintain cultural continuity while addressing current social and political issues. The scientific study of these sites continues to reveal new aspects of their sophistication and cultural significance. Isotope analysis of human remains found at earthwork sites provides evidence of diet, migration patterns, and social relationships that illuminate the daily lives of the people who built these monuments. DNA analysis reveals genetic relationships between ancient and modern populations, while documenting the demographic impacts of European contact. Environmental archaeology reconstructs the ecological contexts in which earthwork cultures developed, revealing sophisticated relationships between human societies and natural systems. Pollen analysis documents ancient vegetation patterns and agricultural practices. Soil studies reveal environmental management techniques that maintained landscape stability across multiple centuries. These scientific investigations provide increasingly detailed pictures of how earthwork cultures functioned, while demonstrating their relevance to contemporary environmental challenges. The sustainable agriculture systems developed around major earthwork sites offer models for modern farming practices that maintain productivity while preserving ecological health. The water management techniques used at sites like Cahokia demonstrate sophisticated understanding of hydrology and flood control that modern urban planners are studying with renewed interest. Ancient engineers created drainage systems, retention basins, and flow control structures that managed water resources across entire watersheds using only human labor and natural materials. These achievements become even more remarkable when considered in their global context. The earthwork builders of North America developed these innovations independently, without access to old world technologies or knowledge systems. Their achievements represent genuine indigenous innovation that demonstrates human creative potential operating under unique cultural and environmental conditions. The recognition of these achievements has important implications for contemporary understanding of human cultural development. Rather than viewing technological and social complexity as linear progressions toward modern Western models, the earthwork traditions demonstrate alternative pathways to sophisticated civilization that achieved remarkable results through different approaches to environmental relationships, social organization, and cultural expression. These alternative models become increasingly relevant as contemporary societies grapple with environmental degradation, social inequality, and cultural fragmentation. The earthwork builders achieved prosperity and cultural sophistication while maintaining ecological balance and social cohesion across multiple centuries. Their approaches to these universal challenges offer insights that transcend their specific historical contexts. The astronomical knowledge encoded in earthwork alignments demonstrates sophisticated scientific understanding that developed through careful observation and mathematical analysis. These achievements weren't accidental discoveries, but represented systematic investigation of natural phenomena conducted over multiple generations. The resulting knowledge was preserved in permanent monuments designed to transmit essential information across cultural and temporal boundaries. The geometric precision achieved in earthwork construction reveals mathematical knowledge that rivals contemporaneous achievements anywhere in the world. The standardized measurements found at sites separated by hundreds of miles indicate shared knowledge systems and communication networks that maintained technical standards across vast territories and extended time periods. These achievements challenge conventional assumptions about the development of mathematical and scientific knowledge in human societies. Rather than viewing such knowledge as emerging from specific cultural traditions, the earthwork evidence demonstrates that sophisticated understanding of natural phenomena can develop independently under diverse conditions when human communities commit sustained effort to systematic observation and analysis. The artistic traditions associated with earthwork sites reveal aesthetic sensibilities and symbolic systems that rank among humanity's finest cultural achievements. The shell engravings from Spiro mounds demonstrate technical skills and artistic sophistication that rival any contemporaneous art tradition. The copperwork from Hopewell sites shows mastery of metallurgical techniques and design principles that influenced artistic development across broad regions. But these weren't just beautiful objects created for elite consumption. They represented sophisticated communication systems that encoded religious beliefs, astronomical knowledge, and political relationships in visual forms designed to transmit complex information across cultural boundaries. Understanding these symbolic systems provides insights into knowledge transmission methods that sustained complex societies across centuries of cultural development. The trade networks that supplied materials for these artistic traditions demonstrate economic relationships of remarkable scope and sophistication. Exotic materials traveled thousands of miles through networks of rivers, trails, and human relationships to reach craft centers where they were transformed into objects of extraordinary beauty and cultural significance. These economic relationships weren't just commercial exchanges, but represented diplomatic and cultural connections that maintained peaceful cooperation across diverse communities. The fact that these networks functioned effectively for centuries indicates political and social institutions that successfully managed complex inter-community relationships across vast territories. The agricultural innovations developed to support earthwork communities represent equally remarkable achievements in environmental management and food production. The intensive farming systems that supplied major sites like Cahokia achieved productivity levels that supported urban populations larger than most medieval European cities, while maintaining soil fertility across multiple centuries. These agricultural achievements required sophisticated understanding of soil science, hydrology, and crop genetics that allowed earthwork builders to maximize production while preventing environmental degradation. The techniques they developed influenced agricultural practices across broad regions and provided models for sustainable farming that remained effective long after the major earthwork sites were abandoned. The political systems that coordinated these diverse achievements represent unique experiments in cooperative governance that balanced centralized coordination with local autonomy. The loose confederations that built and maintained earthwork sites created institutional arrangements that supported large-scale projects while preserving community independence and cultural diversity. These political innovations become increasingly relevant as contemporary societies struggle with similar challenges of coordinating collective action while maintaining democratic participation and cultural autonomy. The earthwork builders developed governance models that successfully managed these tensions across multiple centuries, providing examples of sustainable political arrangements that modern democratic theorists are studying with growing interest. The environmental management practices developed by earthwork cultures offer equally valuable insights for contemporary sustainability efforts. These societies achieved prosperity and cultural sophistication while maintaining ecological balance through sophisticated understanding of natural systems and careful management of resource extraction and landscape modification. The water management systems, soil conservation techniques, and sustainable harvesting practices developed by earthwork builders represent genuine innovations in environmental stewardship that allowed human societies to thrive within natural limits, rather than attempting to dominate or transcend ecological constraints. These achievements become increasingly important as contemporary societies confront environmental challenges that threaten long-term sustainability. The earthwork builders demonstrated that human societies can achieve remarkable cultural and technological sophistication while maintaining harmonious relationships with natural systems across extended time periods. The time periods. The religious and spiritual dimensions of these earthwork cultures reveal worldviews of extraordinary sophistication that integrated astronomy, agriculture, and social organization into coherent cosmological systems. Unlike modern societies that separate scientific observation from spiritual practice, earthwork builders understood these domains as interconnected aspects of a unified reality that required careful attention and reverence. Archaeological evidence suggests that pyramid construction was intimately connected to seasonal cycles and agricultural rhythms that governed community life. At Cahokia, the Grand Plaza served as both ceremonial center and massive solar calendar, where thousands of people gathered for festivals marking planting seasons, harvest celebrations, and astronomical events that punctuated the annual cycle. These gatherings weren't simply religious ceremonies or political assemblies. They were complex events that combined spiritual practice with economic exchange, social bonding, and knowledge transmission. Participants traveled hundreds of miles to attend these festivals, bringing trade goods, cultural innovations, and information that connected distant communities into networks of shared identity and mutual support. The wooden structures that crowned the pyramid platforms housed ritual activities of remarkable complexity. Archaeological excavations have revealed evidence of elaborate ceremonies involving fire altars, sacred objects, and performance spaces designed for dramatic presentations that communicated mythological narratives and astronomical knowledge to large audiences. These ceremonial performances weren't passive entertainments, but interactive educational experiences that transmitted essential cultural information across generations. Young people learned agricultural techniques, astronomical observations, and social obligations through dramatic presentations that made abstract knowledge tangible and memorable. Adults reinforced their understanding of cosmic cycles and community responsibilities through ritual participation that connected individual identity to broader cultural purposes. The sacred geography created by earthwork builders extended far beyond individual mound sites to encompass entire landscapes modified according to spiritual and practical principles. River valleys were understood as sacred corridors connecting earthwork centers to each other and to the cosmic forces that governed natural cycles. Specific landscape features, from prominent hills to unusual rock formations, were incorporated into ceremonial complexes that treated the entire environment as a sacred text requiring careful interpretation. This landscape-scale approach to sacred architecture has few parallels in other ancient civilizations. Rather than creating isolated temples or monuments, earthwork builders developed integrated systems that treated entire watersheds as ceremonial spaces where human activities harmonized with natural processes through careful attention to seasonal rhythms and environmental relationships. The astronomical knowledge embedded in these sacred landscapes demonstrates observational capabilities that were centuries ahead of their time. At the Octagon Earthworks in Newark, the builders encoded lunar cycles spanning 18.5 years into geometric forms that track the moon's complex orbital patterns with remarkable precision. This required sustained observation across multiple generations combined with mathematical sophistication that wasn't achieved in European astronomy until the Renaissance. But these astronomical alignments weren't just abstract scientific achievements. They represented practical tools for coordinating agricultural activities, ceremonial schedules, and social obligations across vast territories. Communities separated by hundreds of miles could synchronize their activities by reference to shared astronomical markers encoded in permanent earthen monuments that served as both calendars and communication devices. The precision required for these astronomical observations demanded institutional arrangements that could maintain continuous records across decades of observation. This suggests the existence of specialized priest astronomer classes whose responsibilities included monitoring celestial cycles, maintaining observational records, and transmitting astronomical knowledge through formal educational systems that preserved essential information across generations. Archaeological evidence supports the existence of these specialized knowledge keepers. Burial sites at major earthwork centers have yielded elaborate grave goods that appear to represent astronomical instruments, mathematical calculating devices, and symbolic objects related to celestial observation. These burials suggest that astronomical knowledge was closely guarded by elite specialists whose social status derived from their mastery of complex technical information. The mathematical principles underlying earthwork construction reveal sophisticated understanding of geometric relationships and proportional systems that influence architectural traditions across broad regions. The standardized measurements found at Hopewell sites demonstrate shared knowledge of surveying techniques and mathematical relationships that maintained consistent proportions across structures built decades apart and hundreds of miles from each other. This mathematical sophistication extended beyond simple measurement to include complex geometric relationships that created visually harmonious proportions while encoding symbolic meanings related to cosmological beliefs. The builders understood principles of visual perception and psychological impact that allowed them to create monuments that appeared larger and more impressive than their actual dimensions, while maintaining structural integrity across centuries of weathering. The engineering challenges involved in earthwork construction required innovative solutions to problems that modern builders address with heavy machinery and scientific instruments. Ancient engineers developed techniques for moving massive quantities of earth across difficult terrain using only human labor and simple tools. They created drainage systems that prevented erosion while managing water flow across entire watersheds. They solved foundation problems in flood-prone environments using only natural materials and empirical observation. Perhaps most remarkably, they coordinated these complex engineering projects while maintaining agricultural production, craft specialization, and long-distance trade relationships that supported community life. This required project management capabilities that balanced competing demands for labor and resources, while ensuring that essential activities continued without disruption during major construction phases. The social organization required for these achievements challenges conventional assumptions about prehistoric political arrangements. The earthwork builders created governance systems that could coordinate massive construction projects involving thousands of workers while maintaining community cohesion and individual motivation across projects spanning multiple generations. Evidence suggests that these political arrangements combined hereditary leadership with merit-based advancement opportunities that allowed skilled individuals to achieve high status regardless of birth circumstances. Burial evidence from earthwork sites shows clear social stratification, but also indicates social mobility patterns that rewarded technical expertise, artistic achievement, and leadership capabilities. The craft specialization associated with earthwork centers demonstrates economic arrangements of remarkable sophistication. Archaeological evidence reveals specialized workshops for copperworking, shell carving, ceramic production, and textile manufacture that supplied both local communities and distant trading partners. These craft specialists achieved technical mastery and artistic sophistication that rival any ancient tradition, while developing innovations that influenced cultural development across broad regions. The raw materials for these craft industries traveled thousands of miles through trade networks that connected earthwork centers to resource extraction areas across the continent. Copper from the Great Lakes region, marine shells from the Gulf Coast, and exotic stones from the Rocky Mountains reached craft workshops where they were transformed into objects of extraordinary beauty and cultural significance. These trade relationships weren't just commercial exchanges, but represented diplomatic and cultural connections that maintained peaceful cooperation across diverse communities for centuries. The fact that these networks functioned effectively across such vast distances and extended time periods indicates institutional arrangements that successfully managed complex inter-community relationships without central political control. The agricultural systems that supported earthwork communities represent equally remarkable achievements in environmental management and food production. The intensive farming techniques developed around major sites achieved productivity levels that supported urban populations while maintaining soil fertility and preventing environmental degradation across multiple centuries of continuous cultivation. Archaeological evidence reveals sophisticated crop rotation systems, fertilization techniques, and field management practices that maximize production while preserving ecological health. These agricultural innovations influenced farming practices across broad regions and provided models for sustainable cultivation that remained effective long after the major earthwork sites were abandoned. The water management systems associated with earthwork sites demonstrate sophisticated understanding of hydrology and flood control that allowed communities to thrive in environmentally challenging locations. Ancient engineers created drainage networks, retention basins, and flow control structures that managed water resources across entire watersheds using only natural materials and human labor. These water management achievements become even more impressive when considered in their geological context. Many earthwork sites were located in flood-prone river valleys, where seasonal flooding posed constant challenges to permanent settlement. The builders developed techniques for working with rather than against these natural cycles, creating infrastructure that enhanced rather than disrupted natural water flow patterns. The environmental restoration potential of these ancient techniques is attracting increasing attention from modern land managers and conservation specialists. The sustainable practices developed by earthwork builders offer models for contemporary restoration projects, while demonstrating that human societies can enhance rather than degrade natural systems through careful attention to ecological relationships. The artistic traditions associated with earthwork cultures reveal aesthetic sensibilities and symbolic systems that rank among humanity's finest cultural achievements. The iconographic programs carved into shell ornaments and engraved on copper plates demonstrate sophisticated understanding of visual communication that encoded complex mythological narratives and astronomical knowledge in artistic forms designed to preserve and transmit essential cultural information. These artistic traditions weren't isolated local developments, but represented continental-scale communication systems that maintained cultural connections across vast territories. Stylistic similarities in artwork from sites separated by thousands of miles indicate shared symbolic vocabularies and cultural concepts that transcended local political boundaries while allowing for regional variation and innovation. The technical mastery demonstrated in these artistic traditions rivals contemporaneous achievements anywhere in the world. Shell carvers developed engraving techniques that achieved extraordinary detail and precision, using only stone tools and natural abrasives. Copper workers created alloy formulations and metalworking techniques that produced objects of remarkable durability and beauty. Ceramic artists developed firing methods and decorative techniques that influenced pottery traditions across broad regions. But these weren't just beautiful objects created for elite appreciation. They represented sophisticated communication technologies that encoded essential cultural information in portable forms that could survive cultural disruptions while transmitting complex knowledge across generations. Understanding these symbolic systems provides insights into knowledge preservation methods that sustained complex societies across centuries of cultural development. The educational systems implied by these artistic and technical achievements suggest sophisticated institutional arrangements for transmitting specialized knowledge across generations. Archaeological evidence indicates the existence of formal apprenticeship programs, specialized schools, and knowledge-keeping institutions that preserve technical skills and cultural traditions through systematic instruction and practice. These educational arrangements weren't limited to technical training, but included comprehensive cultural education that transmitted mythological knowledge, astronomical observations, and social obligations through integrated curricula that connected practical skills to broader worldview principles. The result was educational systems that produced technically competent specialists who also understood their roles within larger cultural and cosmic contexts. The decline of earthwork cultures around 1400 CE represents one of the great turning points in North American history, but the reasons for this collapse remain subjects of ongoing scholarly investigation. Climate change, particularly the onset of the Little Ice Age, disrupted agricultural systems that had supported large populations for centuries. Political instability, possibly triggered by environmental stress, led to warfare and social fragmentation that undermined the cooperative relationships essential for maintaining complex societies. Archaeological evidence from major sites shows clear indicators of decline beginning in the 13th century. Construction projects were abandoned before completion. Population dispersed from urban centres to smaller, more defensible settlements. The elaborate trade networks that had supplied exotic materials for centuries began to collapse as political relationships deteriorated and long-distance travel became increasingly dangerous. But this decline wasn't uniform across all earthwork cultures or simultaneous at all sites. Some communities continued to flourish while others collapsed. Some maintained reduced populations and continued construction activities on smaller scales. Some abandoned their earthwork centres, but preserved cultural traditions that influenced later indigenous societies encountered by European explorers. The Spanish expeditions of the 16th century encountered several communities still actively using earthwork sites for ceremonial and political purposes. These accounts provide crucial evidence for understanding the transition between prehistoric earthwork cultures and the historic indigenous societies documented by European observers. They reveal cultural continuities that connected ancient pyramid builders to their descendant communities while documenting the impacts of European contact on these surviving traditions. Disease epidemics brought by European contact devastated indigenous populations throughout the Americas, with some regions experiencing population declines of up to 90% within a few generations. These demographic catastrophes disrupted the social and political relationships that had sustained earthwork cultures, while destroying the knowledge systems that had guided their development across centuries of innovation. Forced relocations imposed by European colonial governments severed connections between indigenous communities and the landscape features that anchored their cultural identity. The earthwork sites that had served as focal points for community life became inaccessible to the people whose ancestors had built them, disrupting cultural practices that had maintained these traditions across multiple centuries. Missionary activities actively suppressed indigenous religious practices associated with earthwork sites, while promoting European cultural values that rejected native knowledge systems as primitive or demonic. This cultural suppression destroyed much of the oral tradition that had preserved the meaning and significance of earthwork features, while discouraging the transmission of technical knowledge related to their construction and maintenance. The systematic destruction of earthwork sites during the 19th and 20th centuries represents perhaps the greatest single loss of cultural heritage in American history. Agricultural development, urban expansion, and industrial projects destroyed thousands of monuments that had survived for centuries or millennia, eliminating irreplaceable evidence of indigenous achievements while severing physical connections to ancestral landscapes. The mound builder myths that emerged during this period of destruction provided convenient justification for cultural vandalism by attributing earthwork construction to vanished races rather than Native American ancestors. These racist interpretations denied indigenous connections to the monuments, while supporting colonial claims to territories that were supposedly vacant or occupied only by primitive peoples incapable of significant cultural achievement. Recovery from this destruction has been slow and incomplete, but contemporary preservation efforts are making significant progress in protecting surviving sites while documenting traditional knowledge associated with their construction and use. Tribal historic preservation programs work to maintain earthwork sites while revitalizing cultural practices that connect modern indigenous communities to their ancestral achievements. These preservation efforts represent more than historical documentation. They're part of broader movements to assert indigenous sovereignty over ancestral territories, while challenging colonial narratives that have dominated American historical interpretation. The earthwork sites provide powerful evidence of indigenous innovation and environmental stewardship that contradicts stereotypes of primitive peoples living in harmony with nature through simple lifestyles. Modern Native American communities maintain active relationships with earthwork sites, conducting ceremonies and educational programs that preserve cultural traditions while sharing indigenous perspectives with broader audiences. These efforts ensure that the monuments are understood not just as archaeological curiosities, but as expressions of living cultures that continue to evolve while maintaining connections to their ancestral foundations. The scientific techniques being applied to earthwork investigations continue to reveal new aspects of their sophistication, while providing increasingly detailed reconstructions of the societies that built them. Advanced analytical methods allow researchers to trace construction sequences, identify building materials, and reconstruct ancient environmental conditions with unprecedented precision. Isotope analysis of human remains provides evidence of diet, migration patterns, and social relationships that illuminate the daily lives of earthwork builders. DNA studies reveal genetic relationships between ancient and modern populations, while documenting the demographic impacts of European contact. Environmental archaeology reconstructs the ecological contexts in which earthwork cultures developed, while revealing sophisticated relationships between human societies and natural systems. These scientific investigations demonstrate that earthwork builders achieved levels of cultural and technological sophistication that rival any ancient civilization while developing unique solutions to universal human challenges. Their achievements in astronomy, mathematics, engineering, agriculture, and social organization represent genuine innovations that influence cultural development across broad regions and extended time periods. The global significance of these achievements becomes increasingly apparent as researchers develop more sophisticated analytical techniques and broader comparative perspectives. The earthwork traditions of North America represent one of humanity's great experiments in sustainable civilization, demonstrating alternative pathways to cultural complexity that achieved remarkable results through different approaches to environmental relationships and social organization. These alternative models become increasingly relevant as contemporary societies confront challenges of environmental degradation, social inequality, and cultural fragmentation that threaten long-term sustainability. The earthwork builders achieved prosperity and cultural sophistication while maintaining ecological balance and social cohesion across multiple centuries, providing examples of sustainable development that transcend their specific historical contexts. The astronomical knowledge, mathematical principles, and engineering techniques developed by earthwork builders continue to influence contemporary scientific understanding while offering insights relevant to modern challenges. Their approaches to water management, soil conservation, and sustainable agriculture provide models for environmental restoration projects while demonstrating that human societies can enhance rather than degrade natural systems through careful attention to ecological relationships. Perhaps most importantly, the earthwork traditions demonstrate the creative potential of human societies operating under diverse cultural and environmental conditions. Rather than viewing technological and social complexity as linear progressions toward modern Western models, these achievements reveal alternative pathways to sophisticated civilization that offer insights into human adaptability and cultural innovation. The story of North America's lost pyramids isn't just ancient history. It's a testament to human ingenuity, environmental wisdom, and cultural achievement that demands recognition alongside the great monuments of any ancient civilization. These earthen pyramids stand as proof that sophisticated societies flourished across the American continent for thousands of years, creating architectural and cultural innovations that continue to inspire and inform our understanding of human potential. The preservation challenges facing these monuments today underscore just how fragile this legacy really is. Unlike the stone pyramids of Egypt that have weathered millennia with their sharp edges intact, earthen structures are vulnerable in ways that make their survival nothing short of miraculous. Every season brings new threats. Spring floods can wash away sections that took generations to build. Summer droughts crack the carefully compacted soil. Winter freezes expand moisture in the earth, creating fissures that weaken structural integrity. Modern development pressures have proven even more destructive than natural weathering. Shopping malls now sit atop sites where ceremonial plazas once hosted thousands of participants. Interstate highways slice through ancient complexes that once connected communities across vast distances. Suburban subdivisions sprawl across landscapes where sophisticated agricultural systems once fed urban populations larger than medieval European cities. The scale of this destruction becomes clear when you examine what's been lost versus what survives. At the original Cahokia complex, archaeological surveys have identified the locations of nearly 200 individual mounds. Today, fewer than 80 remain in recognizable form. The rest exist only as subtle variations in soil chemistry detectable through advanced ground-penetrating radar, or as faint crop marks visible in aerial photography during specific seasonal conditions. Each lost mound represents more than just an archaeological site. These were repositories of accumulated knowledge encoded in their precise dimensions, their astronomical alignments, and their carefully selected construction materials. When a mound is ploughed flat or buried beneath concrete, we lose not just a monument, but an entire library of information about engineering techniques, social organization, and environmental management practices that sustained complex societies for centuries. The irony is particularly bitter when you consider that many of these sites were destroyed by the very agricultural activities they helped pioneer. The intensive farming techniques developed around earthworks centers created some of the most productive agricultural land in North America. European settlers recognized this fertility and specifically targeted these areas for cultivation, unknowingly destroying the monuments built by the people who had originally developed the agricultural systems they were inheriting. Recent technological advances offer new hope for understanding these sites even when physical preservation isn't possible. LiDAR surveys conducted from aircraft can detect subtle elevation changes invisible to ground-based observation, revealing the locations of earthworks that have been nearly obliterated by centuries of ploughing. These laser-based mapping systems have revolutionized earthwork archaeology, identifying previously unknown sites while providing precise measurements of monuments that survive only as gentle swells in farm fields. Ground-penetrating radar allows archaeologists to examine subsurface features without excavation, revealing construction details and internal structures that illuminate building techniques. Magnetometry detects variations in soil magnetic properties that indicate buried features like hearths, storage pits, and post holes that once supported wooden structures. These non-invasive techniques make it possible to study earthwork sites without disturbing them, preserving them for future investigation while extracting valuable information about their construction and use. Soil chemistry analysis has proven particularly revealing, allowing researchers to identify the sources of construction materials with remarkable precision. By comparing isotope signatures in mound soils with samples from potential source locations, scientists can trace the origins of construction materials across hundreds of miles. This research has revealed the vast scale of the logistics networks that supplied earthwork construction, demonstrating trade relationships and organizational capabilities that challenge every assumption about prehistoric social complexity. At Cahokia, this analysis has shown that colored soils came from specific geological formations in locations as distant as the Appalachian Mountains and the Great Lakes region. The blue clay that gives certain layers their distinctive color originated in deposits over 300 miles away. Red ochre came from even more distant sources in the southeastern highlands. The effort required to transport these materials suggests that their symbolic significance justified enormous expenditures of time and labor. The religious and ceremonial significance of these colored soils becomes apparent when you examine their distribution within the mounds. Rather than being mixed randomly throughout the construction, specific colors appear in particular locations according to patterns that seem to encode symbolic meanings. Blue soils often appear in layers associated with water symbolism, Red soils cluster in areas that may represent solar or fire symbolism. White soils appear in contexts that suggest purity or spiritual transformation. This symbolic use of construction materials reveals worldviews of extraordinary sophistication that integrated practical engineering with spiritual beliefs in ways that Western thinking has difficulty comprehending. For the earthwork builders, there was no separation between the technical and the sacred. Every aspect of construction, from site selection to material procurement to final finishing details, carried symbolic meaning that connected the physical monument to cosmic forces and cultural beliefs. The astronomical alignments embedded in these sites demonstrate scientific understanding that was centuries ahead of its time. The precision achieved at the Newark Octagon requires observational capabilities and mathematical sophistication that wasn't matched in European astronomy until the development of telescopic observation. Yet the earthwork builders achieved this precision using only naked eye observation and geometric principles encoded in permanent earthen monuments. Consider what this means in practical terms. Tracking the lunar standstill cycle requires continuous observation across nearly 2 decades, recording the positions of moonrise and moonset throughout multiple orbital cycles. This demanded institutional arrangements that could maintain observational records across generations while training observers capable of making precise angular measurements using only natural landmarks and geometric relationships. The mathematical knowledge required for these observations extends far beyond simple geometry. Understanding lunar cycles requires grasping complex relationships between multiple orbital periods that operate on different timescales. The builders had to understand how the moon's orbit precesses relative to Earth's axis, how this precession interacts with annual solar cycles, and how to predict these relationships decades into the future. They encoded this knowledge into monuments designed to preserve and transmit astronomical information across cultural disruptions. The earthwork alignments functioned as permanent libraries that could teach celestial mechanics to future generations even if oral traditions were lost. This represents a remarkable achievement in knowledge preservation, creating educational tools that remained functional across centuries of cultural change. The social organization required to coordinate these astronomical projects challenges conventional assumptions about prehistoric political arrangements. Maintaining observational programs across multiple generations requires institutional stability and cultural continuity that most modern societies struggle to achieve. The earthwork builders created governance systems that could sustain complex technical projects while adapting to changing environmental conditions and social pressures. Archaeological evidence suggests that astronomical knowledge was closely guarded by specialized priest astronomer classes whose social status derived from their mastery of celestial observations. Burial sites at major earthwork centers have yielded elaborate grave goods that appear to represent astronomical instruments and calculating devices. These burials suggest hierarchical arrangements where technical expertise translated directly into political authority and social prestige. But this astronomical knowledge wasn't just academic exercise. It provided practical tools for coordinating agricultural activities, ceremonial schedules, and social obligations across vast territories. Communities separated by hundreds of miles could synchronize their activities by reference to shared astronomical markers, creating cultural unity across politically independent regions. The agricultural systems that supported earthwork communities represent equally remarkable achievements in environmental management and food production. The intensive farming techniques developed around major sites achieved productivity levels that supported urban populations while maintaining soil fertility across multiple centuries of continuous cultivation. This required sophisticated understanding of soil science, hydrology, and crop genetics that allowed maximum production without environmental degradation. Archaeological excavations have revealed evidence of complex field systems, irrigation networks, and crop storage facilities that rival those of any ancient civilization. At Cahokia, raised field systems created artificial drainage that allowed intensive cultivation in flood-prone areas. Sophisticated crop rotation practices maintained soil fertility while maximizing yields from limited agricultural land. The agricultural innovations weren't limited to field management. Earthwork communities developed new crop varieties, improved farming tools, and advanced food processing techniques that influenced agricultural practices across broad regions. Archaeological evidence shows that maize varieties developed around earthwork centers spread throughout eastern North America, carrying agricultural innovations that supported population growth and cultural development across vast territories. Storage technologies developed for these agricultural systems allowed communities to accumulate surpluses that funded monumental construction while providing security against harvest failures. Underground storage pits lined with clay and sealed with wooden covers could preserve grain for years, creating food reserves that supported specialized craft workers and construction crews during periods when agricultural labor wasn't required. The integration of agricultural and construction activities reveals project management capabilities that modern organizations struggle to match. Earthwork communities had to balance competing demands for labor between farming and building, while ensuring that food production continued during major construction phases. They developed scheduling systems that coordinated agricultural cycles with construction timelines, maximizing efficiency while maintaining community welfare. The craft specialization associated with earthwork centers demonstrates economic arrangements of remarkable sophistication. Archaeological evidence reveals specialized workshops for copperworking, shell carving, ceramic production, and textile manufacture that supplied both local communities and distant trading partners. These craft specialists achieved technical mastery and artistic sophistication that rival any ancient tradition while developing innovations that influence cultural development across broad regions. The copperworking traditions associated with Hopewell sites demonstrate metallurgical knowledge that wasn't matched in North America until European contact. Craftsmen developed alloy formulations, heating techniques, and forming methods that produced objects of extraordinary beauty and durability. They understood annealing processes that controlled metal hardness and developed joining techniques that created complex multi-component objects. Shell carving traditions reached even higher levels of artistic achievement. Craftsmen working with marine shells created intricate engravings that demonstrate mastery of design principles and technical skills. The level of detail achieved in these carvings rivals anything produced by contemporary civilizations anywhere in the world. These weren't simple decorative objects, but sophisticated communication devices that encoded complex mythological narratives and astronomical knowledge in visual forms. The raw materials for these craft industries traveled incredible distances through trade networks that connected earthwork centers to resource areas across the continent. Copper from the Great Lakes region traveled over 1,000 miles to reach workshops in the southeast. Marine shells from the Gulf Coast were transported up the Mississippi River system to craft centers in Illinois and Ohio. These materials moved through networks of rivers, trails, and human relationships that maintained peaceful exchange across cultural boundaries for centuries. The economic relationships supporting these trade networks reveal political arrangements that successfully managed complex inter-community cooperation without centralized control. Unlike empires that imposed unity through military conquest, the earthwork cultures maintained voluntary associations that balanced local autonomy with regional coordination. This required diplomatic skills and institutional arrangements that prevented conflicts while encouraging mutual support and cultural exchange. The artistic traditions that emerge from these craft centers reveal aesthetic sensibilities and symbolic systems that rank among humanity's finest cultural achievements. The iconographic programs found on shell ornaments and copper plates demonstrate sophisticated understanding of visual communication that encoded essential cultural information in artistic forms designed to preserve and transmit knowledge across generations. These artistic traditions weren't isolated local developments, but represented continental-scale communication systems that maintained cultural connections across vast territories. Stylistic similarities in artwork from sites separated by thousands of miles indicate shared symbolic vocabularies that transcended local political boundaries, while allowing for regional variation and innovation. The technical mastery demonstrated in these artistic traditions becomes even more impressive when you consider the tools and materials available. Shell carvers achieved extraordinary detail using only stone tools and natural abrasives. Copper workers created complex alloys and sophisticated joining techniques using wood-fired furnaces and stone hammers. Ceramic artists developed glazing methods and decorative techniques that influenced pottery traditions across broad regions. But these weren't just beautiful objects created for elite appreciation. They represented sophisticated technologies for encoding and transmitting complex information across cultural boundaries. Understanding these symbolic systems provides insights into knowledge preservation methods that sustained complex societies across centuries of cultural development. The educational implications of these artistic and technical achievements suggest institutional arrangements for transmitting specialized knowledge that rival modern university systems. Archaeological evidence indicates formal apprenticeship programs, specialized schools, and knowledge-keeping institutions that preserved technical skills and cultural traditions through systematic instruction. These educational systems weren't limited to technical training, but included comprehensive cultural education that transmitted astronomical knowledge, historical narratives, and social obligations through integrated curricula. The result was educational arrangements that produced technically competent specialists who understood their roles within larger cultural and cosmic contexts. The decline of earthwork cultures around 1400 CE represents one of the great mysteries of North American archaeology. But recent research is beginning to illuminate the complex factors that contributed to this cultural transformation. Climate change, particularly the onset of the Little Ice Age, disrupted agricultural systems that had supported large populations for centuries. Environmental stresses triggered social and political instabilities that undermined the cooperative relationships essential for maintaining complex societies. Archaeological evidence from Cahokia shows clear indicators of stress beginning in the 13th century. Construction projects were abandoned before completion. Defensive palisades were built around previously open communities. Population began dispersing from urban centers to smaller, more defensible settlements scattered across the landscape. But this wasn't simply collapse, it was transformation. Many earthwork communities adapted to changing conditions by developing new social arrangements and settlement patterns. Some maintained reduced populations while continuing cultural traditions on smaller scales. Others abandoned their earthwork centers, but preserved knowledge systems that influenced later indigenous societies. The Spanish expeditions of the 16th century encountered communities still actively using earthwork sites, providing crucial evidence for understanding cultural continuities between prehistoric earthwork builders and historic indigenous societies. These accounts document ceremonial practices, political arrangements, and technical knowledge that clearly descended from earlier earthwork traditions, while adapting to changed circumstances. These cultural continuities challenge narratives that portray earthwork cultures as mysterious, vanished civilizations. Instead, they reveal living traditions that adapted and evolved while maintaining connections to ancestral achievements. The architectural principles, astronomical knowledge, and environmental management techniques developed by earthwork builders continued to influence indigenous communities across centuries of cultural change. European contact accelerated these transformations while introducing new challenges that traditional adaptation strategies couldn't address. Disease epidemics devastated populations that had no immunity to Old World pathogens. Forced relocations severed connections between communities and ancestral landscapes. Cultural suppression destroyed much of the oral tradition that had preserved the meaning and significance of earthwork features. The systematic destruction of earthwork sites during the colonial and early national periods represents one of the greatest cultural tragedies in American history. Agricultural development, Urban expansion and deliberate vandalism destroyed thousands of monuments while eliminating irreplaceable connections to indigenous heritage. Recovery from this destruction continues today through preservation efforts that combine scientific research with indigenous cultural revitalization. Tribal historic preservation programs work to protect surviving sites while documenting traditional knowledge associated with their construction and use. Contemporary Native American communities maintain active relationships with earthwork sites, conducting ceremonies and educational programs that preserve cultural traditions, while sharing indigenous perspectives with broader audiences. The scientific study of earthwork sites continues to reveal new aspects of their sophistication while providing increasingly detailed reconstructions of the societies that built them. Advanced analytical techniques allow researchers to trace construction sequences, identify building materials, and reconstruct ancient environmental conditions with unprecedented precision. Perhaps most importantly, these investigations demonstrate that earthwork builders achieved levels of cultural and technological sophistication that rival any ancient civilization while developing unique solutions to universal human challenges. Their achievements in astronomy, mathematics, engineering, agriculture, and social organization represent genuine innovations that continue to offer insights relevant to contemporary challenges. The global significance of these achievements becomes increasingly apparent as researchers develop broader comparative perspectives and more sophisticated analytical techniques. The earthwork traditions of North America represent one of humanity's great experiments in sustainable civilization, demonstrating alternative pathways to cultural complexity that achieved remarkable results through different approaches to environmental relationships and social organization. These alternative models become increasingly relevant as contemporary societies confront challenges that threaten long-term sustainability. The earthwork builders achieved prosperity and cultural sophistication while maintaining ecological balance across multiple centuries, providing examples that transcend their specific historical contexts, while offering insights into human potential for cultural innovation and environmental stewardship. The astronomical knowledge, mathematical principles, and engineering techniques developed by earthwork builders continue to influence contemporary understanding while offering solutions to modern challenges. Their approaches to water management, soil conservation, and sustainable agriculture provide models for environmental restoration while demonstrating that human societies can enhance rather than degrade natural systems through careful attention to ecological relationships. The story of North America's lost pyramids reveals achievements that demand recognition alongside the great monuments of any ancient civilization. These earthen pyramids represent more than archaeological curiosities. They stand as testimony to human ingenuity, cultural sophistication, and environmental wisdom that challenges conventional understanding while inspiring contemporary efforts to create sustainable relationships between human societies and the natural world. Natural world. The complexity of earthwork engineering becomes even more remarkable when you examine the sophisticated drainage systems that allowed these monuments to survive for millennia. Unlike modern construction that relies on concrete and steel reinforcement, earthwork builders had to create structures that could withstand centuries of rainfall, flooding, and freeze-thaw cycles, using only carefully selected soils and ingenious design principles. At Monk's Mound, archaeological investigations have revealed an intricate internal drainage network that channels water away from the structure's core while preventing erosion of the carefully layered construction materials. The builders understood that water infiltration posed the greatest threat to earthen monuments, so they developed techniques for managing moisture that wouldn't be matched in North American engineering until the development of modern geotechnical science. The foundation systems used at these sites demonstrate equally sophisticated understanding of soil mechanics and structural engineering. In flood-prone river valleys where many earthwork centers were located, builders had to create stable foundations on soft alluvial soils that could support enormous weights without settling or sliding. They developed techniques for ground preparation, soil stabilization, and load distribution that allowed massive structures to remain intact across geological timescales. Recent geotechnical analysis of surviving earthworks has revealed construction details that continue to amaze modern engineers. At poverty point, core samples show that builders used different soil types in precisely calculated ratios to create composite materials with specific engineering properties. Clay-rich layers provide structural strength and water resistance. Sandy layers improve drainage and prevent water accumulation. Organic-rich soils create flexible zones that accommodate ground movement without structural failure. This wasn't trial and error construction. Archaeological evidence suggests that earthwork builders developed standardized soil classification systems and testing procedures that allowed them to predict material performance before construction began. They understood concepts like bearing capacity, shear strength, and hydraulic conductivity at levels that wouldn't be codified in engineering textbooks until the 20th century. The construction sequencing revealed through archaeological excavation demonstrates project management capabilities that rival modern large-scale infrastructure projects. At Cahokia, stratigraphic analysis shows that Monk's Mound was built in carefully planned phases that allowed portions of the structure to settle and stabilize before additional loads were applied. This prevented the catastrophic failures that would have occurred if the entire mass had been constructed simultaneously. Work crews operated according to quality control standards that ensured consistent results across decades of construction. Soil layers show uniform thickness and composition that could only have been achieved through systematic monitoring and standardized procedures. The absence of erosion surfaces between construction phases indicates that work proceeded according to carefully coordinated schedules that minimized exposure to weather damage. The organizational requirements for these projects extend far beyond simple labor coordination. Feeding thousands of workers required agricultural planning and food distribution systems that could maintain consistent supplies across multiple growing seasons. Housing temporary laborers demanded extensive residential construction and infrastructure development. Tool production, from the countless baskets needed for earth transport to specialized implements for soil preparation and compaction, represented entire industries dedicated to supporting earthwork construction. Archaeological evidence suggests that earthwork communities developed sophisticated logistics systems for managing these complex supply chains. Storage facilities found at major sites could hold enough surplus grain to feed construction crews for months. Workshop areas show evidence of mass production techniques for manufacturing the tools and containers needed for earth-moving operations. Transportation networks connected construction sites to resource areas through systems of rivers, trails, and temporary camps. The social coordination required for these projects reveals political arrangements that successfully managed competing interests while maintaining community cohesion across extended construction periods. Archaeological evidence suggests that work crews were organized according to kinship groups, craft specialties, and geographic origins that balance cooperation with healthy competition between teams. Burial evidence from earthwork sites indicates social stratification systems that rewarded technical expertise and project leadership while maintaining opportunities for advancement based on merit rather than birth status. Skilled engineers and project supervisors achieved high social status that was recognized through elaborate burial treatments and prestigious grave goods. The symbolic dimensions of earthwork construction add another layer of complexity to these already remarkable achievements. The careful selection of colored soils from distant locations wasn't just aesthetic choice, but represented spiritual beliefs that connected physical construction to cosmic forces and cultural values. Every aspect of building, from ground preparation to final finishing, carried meaning that integrated practical engineering with religious symbolism. Archaeological analysis of soil distributions within major earthworks reveals patterns that seem to encode specific mythological narratives or astronomical observations. At Spiro Mounds, different colored earth layers correspond to directional symbolism found in historic indigenous cosmology. blue soils appear in eastern sections associated with water and renewal. Red earth clusters in southern areas linked to fire and growth. White materials concentrate in northern zones, connected to winter and spiritual transformation. This symbolic use of construction materials reveals worldviews that understood no separation between technical and sacred knowledge. Engineering decisions were simultaneously spiritual choices that connected human construction to larger cosmic patterns. The resulting monuments functioned as both practical structures and religious texts that could be read by those who understood the cultural codes embedded in their construction. The astronomical alignments found throughout these earthwork complexes demonstrate scientific capabilities that challenge every assumption about prehistoric intellectual development. The precision achieved at sites like Newark requires observational programs spanning multiple decades combined with mathematical sophistication that wasn't matched in European science until the development of modern astronomy. Recent archaeoastronomical research has revealed alignment systems of extraordinary complexity that track not just solar and lunar cycles, but stellar phenomena that operate on timescales spanning centuries. At Cahokia, computer modeling has identified structure orientations that correspond to the rising positions of specific star groups at dates significant in indigenous calendrical systems. These stellar alignments required understanding of precession, the slow wobble of Earth's rotational axis that shifts star positions over thousands of years. The builders incorporated this knowledge into monuments designed to remain astronomically accurate across geological time periods. This represents mathematical and observational capabilities that rival those of any ancient civilization, while demonstrating unique approaches to preserving and transmitting scientific knowledge. The water management systems associated with earthworks sites reveal environmental engineering capabilities that modern hydrologists are studying with renewed interest. Ancient engineers created watershed management systems that controlled flooding while maintaining soil fertility across entire river valleys. They understood how to work with natural water flow patterns rather than attempting to dominate them through engineering brute force. At Cahokia, archaeological evidence reveals a sophisticated system of channels, retention basins, and flow control structures that managed water resources across the entire American bottom floodplain. These engineering works prevented flood damage during high water periods, while ensuring adequate moisture for agricultural production during dry seasons. The system functioned effectively for centuries without the concrete, steel, or heavy machinery that modern flood control projects require. The agricultural innovations developed around earthwork centers represent equally remarkable achievements in sustainable food production. Intensive farming techniques that supported urban populations were developed without depleting soil fertility or causing environmental degradation. Archaeological evidence shows that crop yields remained stable across multiple centuries of continuous cultivation, indicating agricultural practices that enhanced rather than degraded natural productivity. Raised field systems found at major earthworks sites demonstrate sophisticated understanding of soil chemistry and hydrology that allowed maximum production from limited agricultural land. These artificial growing environments created ideal conditions for crop growth while preventing the waterlogging and nutrient depletion that typically result from intensive cultivation in flood-prone areas. The crop varieties developed by earthwork communities influenced agricultural practices across continental scales. Archaeological evidence shows that maize strains bred for specific environmental conditions spread throughout eastern North America, carrying agricultural innovations that supported population growth and cultural development across vast territories. These agricultural achievements provided the economic foundation that made large-scale earthwork construction possible while demonstrating sustainable farming techniques that maintain productivity across extended time periods. Storage technologies developed for these agricultural systems represent another area of remarkable innovation. Underground storage facilities lined with specially prepared clays could preserve grain for years without spoilage. These preservation techniques allowed communities to accumulate surpluses that funded monumental construction while providing security against harvest failures. The craft industries associated with earthwork centers achieved levels of technical mastery and artistic sophistication that rival any ancient tradition. Copper working techniques developed at Hopewell sites produced objects of extraordinary beauty, using metallurgical knowledge that wouldn't be matched in North America until European contact. Shell carving traditions reached artistic heights that demonstrate complete mastery of design principles and technical execution. The raw materials for these craft industries traveled incredible distances through trade networks that span the continent. Archaeological analysis has traced copper artifacts found in Georgia back to source deposits near Lake Superior, over 1,000 miles away. Marine shells from the Gulf of Mexico reached craft workshops in Ohio through river systems and overland trails that connected distant communities in networks of peaceful exchange. These trade relationships weren't just commercial transactions, but represented diplomatic and cultural connections that maintained cooperation across diverse communities for centuries. The fact that exotic materials moved freely through these networks indicates political arrangements that prevented conflicts while encouraging mutual support and cultural exchange. The artistic traditions that emerge from these craft centers reveal communication systems of remarkable sophistication. Iconographic programs found on ceremonial objects encode complex mythological narratives, astronomical observations, and political symbolism in visual forms designed to transmit essential cultural information across linguistic and cultural boundaries. Recent analysis of these artistic traditions has revealed shared symbolic vocabularies that connected communities across thousands of miles, while allowing for regional variation and innovation. Stylistic similarities in artwork from sites separated by vast distances indicate communication networks that maintained cultural unity across politically independent territories. The educational systems implied by these technical and artistic achievements suggest institutional arrangements for knowledge transmission that rival modern academic institutions. Archaeological evidence indicates specialized schools, formal apprenticeship programs, and knowledge-keeping institutions that preserved complex technical and cultural information across generations through systematic instruction and practice. These educational arrangements weren't limited to technical training, but included comprehensive cultural education that integrated practical skills with astronomical knowledge, historical narratives, and spiritual beliefs. The result was educational systems that produced specialists who understood their technical roles within larger cultural and cosmic contexts. The decline of earthwork cultures represents a complex transformation rather than simple collapse. Climate change, environmental stress, and social instability all contributed to changes that altered but didn't eliminate these remarkable cultural traditions. Many earthwork communities adapted to changing conditions by developing new social arrangements while preserving essential knowledge systems. Archaeological evidence from the period of decline shows communities implementing defensive measures, changing settlement patterns, and modifying construction practices in response to increased social stress. But these adaptations maintained cultural continuity while adjusting to new circumstances. The knowledge systems, artistic traditions, and technical capabilities developed by earthwork builders continued to influence indigenous societies across centuries of cultural change. Contemporary recognition of these achievements through UNESCO World Heritage designations and national monument status provides protection for surviving sites while acknowledging their significance as monuments of global importance. These recognitions place North American earthwork traditions in their proper context as achievements that rank among humanity's greatest cultural expressions. Modern scientific investigation continues to reveal new aspects of earthwork sophistication while providing detailed reconstructions of the societies that created these monuments. Advanced analytical techniques allow researchers to understand construction processes, trace material sources, and reconstruct ancient environmental conditions with unprecedented precision. Perhaps most importantly, collaboration between archaeologists and indigenous communities has restored cultural perspectives that were nearly lost through centuries of suppression and neglect. Contemporary Native American communities maintain active relationships with earthwork sites while sharing traditional knowledge that illuminates aspects of their meaning and significance that purely academic research could never discover. The story of North America's lost pyramids challenges conventional narratives about American history, while revealing achievements that demand recognition alongside the great monuments of any civilization. These earthwork traditions demonstrate that sophisticated societies flourished across the American continent for thousands of years, developing unique solutions to universal human challenges, while creating architectural and cultural innovations that continue to inspire contemporary understanding of human potential and environmental stewardship. The legacy of these remarkable achievements extends far beyond their immediate historical significance. The sustainable development practices, astronomical knowledge, and social organization techniques developed by earthwork builders offer insights relevant to contemporary challenges, while demonstrating alternative pathways to cultural complexity that achieved extraordinary results through careful attention to ecological relationships and community cooperation. The preservation efforts taking place today represent humanity's last chance to protect these irreplaceable monuments from complete destruction. Every year that passes without comprehensive protection measures means more sites disappear forever beneath suburban sprawl or industrial development. The race against time has never been more urgent, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Consider the Spiro Mounds complex in Oklahoma, where commercial looters in the 1930s destroyed centuries of accumulated artifacts in just a few months of uncontrolled digging. They dynamited burial chambers, scattered priceless shell engravings, and obliterated archaeological contexts that had preserved cultural information for over 1,000 years. The damage was so extensive that archaeologists are still trying to piece together what was lost from fragments scattered in private collections around the world. This pattern of destruction repeated itself at dozens of sites across the continent during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Amateur treasure hunters, commercial artifact dealers, and even early archaeologists operating without modern scientific standards destroyed more information than they preserved. Each artifact removed from its original context represented not just a lost object, but an entire web of cultural relationships that could never be reconstructed. The irony is particularly bitter when you consider that many of these sites were destroyed by people who claimed to be preserving American heritage. The Smithsonian Institution's early archaeological expeditions, while well-intentioned, often employed destructive excavation techniques that obliterated the very evidence they were trying to document. Entire mounds were dug through without proper recording, destroying stratified deposits that had taken centuries to accumulate. Modern preservation efforts face different but equally challenging obstacles. Urban development pressure continues to threaten surviving sites, particularly those located near growing metropolitan areas. The flat, well-drained terraces that ancient builders selected for their monuments are exactly the same locations that modern developers prefer for shopping centres and residential subdivisions. Legal protection varies dramatically from state to state, with some jurisdictions providing robust archaeological preservation laws, while others offer virtually no protection for prehistoric sites on private property. Federal legislation protects sites on public lands, but the majority of important earthwork locations remain in private ownership, where development decisions rest entirely with individual landowners. Economic incentives often work against preservation. Agricultural land containing earthwork sites commands premium prices because of the soil fertility that originally attracted ancient builders. The same geological and environmental factors that made these locations ideal for prehistoric settlements make them equally attractive for modern development projects. The challenge becomes even more complex when you consider that many earthwork features are invisible without sophisticated detection equipment. Subtle elevation changes that represent the remains of ancient monuments may not be apparent to casual observation, leading to inadvertent destruction during routine agricultural or construction activities. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted across the Midwest have revealed the ghostly outlines of hundreds of previously unknown earthwork sites. These geophysical investigations show that the surviving monuments represent only a small fraction of what once existed. The full extent of North American earthwork traditions was far greater than anyone previously imagined. Aerial photography, using specialized cameras sensitive to infrared wavelengths, can detect vegetation patterns that reveal buried archaeological features. Plants growing over ancient earthworks often display different growth characteristics than those in surrounding areas, creating subtle but detectable variations in crop color and density that mark the locations of vanished monuments. Satellite imagery analyzed through computer algorithms can identify potential earthwork locations across vast territories, allowing archaeologists to prioritize areas for detailed investigation. These remote sensing techniques have revolutionized earthwork archaeology, making it possible to survey enormous regions that would take decades to examine through traditional ground-based methods. The scientific techniques being applied to earthwork investigation continue to yield extraordinary discoveries about construction methods and cultural practices. Soil micromorphology examines microscopic characteristics that reveal how ancient builders processed and prepared construction materials. These studies show that earthwork construction involved sophisticated understanding of soil physics and chemistry that allowed builders to create materials with specific engineering properties. Phytolithanalysis identifies microscopic plant remains preserved in earthwork soils, providing evidence of the vegetation that grew on ancient construction sites. This research reveals that builders often incorporated specific plant materials into their earthwork designs, using organic matter to improve soil stability and drainage characteristics. Magnetic susceptibility surveys detect variations in soil magnetic properties that indicate human activities like burning, metalworking, and intensive occupation. These techniques can identify activity areas, workshop locations, and ceremonial spaces associated with earthwork construction, without requiring excavation that might damage fragile archaeological deposits. Radiocarbon dating of organic materials found within earthwork construction layers provides precise chronological frameworks that illuminate building sequences and construction timelines. These dates reveal that major earthwork projects often required sustained effort across multiple generations, with some monuments showing construction phases spanning several centuries. The integration of multiple analytical techniques creates increasingly detailed pictures of how earthwork communities functioned, while revealing the full scope of their achievements. Rather than simple agricultural villages with ceremonial centers, these investigations show complex urban societies with sophisticated infrastructure, specialized industries, and continental-scale trade networks. Recent excavations at Cahokia have uncovered evidence of craft workshops, residential districts, and administrative complexes that supported the largest prehistoric city north of Mexico. Archaeological evidence shows that the urban core housed tens of thousands of residents, while the surrounding regions supported hundreds of thousands of people connected to the central city through economic, political, and religious relationships. The social complexity revealed through these investigations challenges fundamental assumptions about the development of complex societies in North America. Traditional models suggested that urban civilization required Old World influences or technological innovations like writing systems and metal tools. The earthwork cultures demonstrate that sophisticated societies could develop independently using different technological pathways and social arrangements. Political organization in these societies appears to have been more flexible and inclusive than the rigid hierarchies found in many Old World civilizations. Archaeological evidence suggests power-sharing arrangements that balance centralized coordination with local autonomy, creating governance systems that could manage large-scale projects while maintaining community independence. Religious practices integrated astronomical observation with seasonal ceremonies that connected spiritual beliefs to agricultural cycles and social activities. The monuments themselves served as permanent calendars that encoded essential cultural information in forms designed to survive political disruptions and cultural changes. Artistic traditions associated with earthwork cultures reveal aesthetic sensibilities and technical capabilities that rank among humanity's finest achievements. Shell carvings from Spiro demonstrate mastery of design principles and engraving techniques that rival contemporaneous art from any civilization. Copperwork from Hopewell sites shows metallurgical knowledge and artistic sophistication that influence cultural development across broad regions. The iconographic systems encoded in these artistic traditions represent sophisticated communication technologies that preserved and transmitted complex cultural information across generations. Understanding these symbolic systems provides insights into knowledge preservation methods that sustained complex societies across centuries of development. Educational arrangements implied by these technical and artistic achievements suggest institutional systems for transmitting specialized knowledge that rival modern academic institutions. Archaeological evidence indicates formal training programs, specialized schools, and knowledge-keeping institutions that preserved essential cultural and technical information through systematic instruction. The environmental management practices developed by earthwork cultures offer models for sustainable development that become increasingly relevant as contemporary societies confront ecological challenges. These societies achieved prosperity while maintaining environmental balance through sophisticated understanding of natural systems and careful attention to ecological relationships. Water management techniques developed at earthwork sites demonstrate hydrological engineering that worked with rather than against natural flow patterns. Ancient engineers created infrastructure that enhanced rather than disrupted natural water cycles, providing flood control and irrigation while maintaining ecological health across entire watersheds. Agricultural innovations developed around earthwork centers achieved remarkable productivity while preserving soil fertility across multiple centuries of intensive cultivation. These sustainable farming techniques influenced agricultural practices across continental scales, while providing economic foundations that supported urban development and monumental construction. The trade networks that supplied earthwork construction and craft production demonstrate economic arrangements of remarkable scope and sophistication. Exotic materials traveled thousands of miles through systems of peaceful exchange that maintained cooperative relationships across diverse communities for centuries. These economic networks weren't just commercial arrangements, but represented diplomatic and cultural connections that prevented conflicts while encouraging innovation and cultural development. The institutional arrangements that maintained these relationships offer insights into cooperation mechanisms that contemporary societies struggle to achieve. The decline of earthwork cultures represents complex social transformations rather than simple collapse. Climate change, environmental stress, and political instability contributed to changes that altered but didn't eliminate these cultural traditions. Many communities adapted to new circumstances while preserving essential knowledge systems and cultural practices. Archaeological evidence from the transition period shows communities implementing defensive measures, changing settlement patterns, and modifying construction practices in response to increased social stress. But these adaptations maintained cultural continuity while adjusting to changing environmental and political conditions. The Spanish expeditions of the 16th century encountered communities still actively using earthwork sites, providing crucial evidence for understanding cultural continuities between prehistoric and historic indigenous societies. These accounts document ceremonial practices, political arrangements, and technical knowledge that clearly descended from earlier earthwork traditions. Contemporary Native American communities maintain active relationships with earthwork sites while preserving cultural traditions that connect them to their ancestral achievements. These living connections ensure that the monuments are understood not just as archaeological curiosities, but as expressions of ongoing cultural traditions. Modern recognition through UNESCO World Heritage designations and national monument status provides legal protection for surviving sites while acknowledging their significance as achievements of global importance. These recognitions place North American earthwork traditions in their proper context as monuments that rank among humanity's greatest cultural expressions. Scientific investigation continues to reveal new aspects of earthwork sophistication while providing detailed reconstructions of the societies that created these remarkable monuments. Advanced analytical techniques allow researchers to understand construction processes, trace material sources, and reconstruct ancient environmental conditions with unprecedented precision. Collaborative research partnerships between archaeologists and tribal communities restore indigenous perspectives that illuminate cultural meanings and significance that purely academic research could never discover. These partnerships ensure that earthwork investigations respect cultural protocols while advancing scientific understanding. The educational potential of these sites extends far beyond their archaeological significance. They provide powerful examples of sustainable development, environmental stewardship, and social cooperation that offer insights relevant to contemporary challenges while demonstrating human potential for cultural innovation and environmental harmony. Public education programs at earthwork sites create opportunities for direct engagement with physical evidence of human achievement while fostering appreciation for indigenous knowledge systems and cultural contributions. These programs challenge stereotypes while building understanding of the sophistication and diversity of Native American societies. The preservation of earthwork sites represents more than historical documentation. It's part of broader efforts to maintain cultural diversity while protecting irreplaceable evidence of human creativity and environmental wisdom. The earthwork traditions demonstrate alternative pathways to sophisticated civilization that achieved remarkable results through different approaches to social organization and environmental relationships. Contemporary challenges of climate change, environmental degradation, and social inequality make the achievements of earthwork cultures increasingly relevant as sources of inspiration and practical guidance. These societies demonstrated that human communities can achieve prosperity and cultural sophistication while maintaining ecological balance and social cooperation across extended time periods. The astronomical knowledge, mathematical principles, and engineering techniques developed by earthwork builders continue to influence contemporary understanding while offering solutions to modern challenges. Their approaches to sustainable development provide models that transcend their specific historical contexts while demonstrating human potential for innovation and environmental stewardship. The story of North America's lost pyramids isn't just ancient history. It's a testament to human ingenuity, cultural achievement, and environmental wisdom that demands recognition as one of humanity's great experiments in sustainable civilization. These earthen monuments stand as proof that sophisticated societies flourished across the American continent for thousands of years, creating architectural and cultural innovations that continue to inspire our understanding of what human communities can achieve when they work in harmony with natural systems and each other. The earthwork traditions reveal achievements that challenge conventional narratives while demonstrating the remarkable diversity of human cultural development. They show that technological and social complexity can emerge through many different pathways, offering insights into human adaptability and creative potential that expand our understanding of what civilizations can accomplish. These monuments demand recognition alongside the great achievements of any ancient civilization, while providing inspiration for contemporary efforts to create sustainable relationships between human societies and the natural world. The builders of North America's lost pyramids achieved something remarkable, creating monuments that have survived for millennia while embodying principles of environmental stewardship and social cooperation that remain relevant to contemporary challenges. Their legacy extends far beyond the physical monuments to include knowledge systems, cultural practices, and environmental management techniques that continue to influence modern understanding of sustainable development. The earthwork traditions represent one of humanity's great achievements in creating sophisticated societies that enhanced rather than degraded the natural systems that supported them. The preservation and study of these remarkable monuments ensures that their lessons remain available to future generations while honoring the achievements of the indigenous societies that created them. The lost pyramids of North America stand as testimony to human potential, cultural sophistication, and environmental wisdom that deserves recognition as one of the world's great architectural and cultural traditions. The implications of these discoveries extend far beyond archaeology into fundamental questions about human potential and cultural development. When you examine the scope of what earthwork builders achieved using only human labor and natural materials, you're looking at engineering solutions that challenge modern assumptions about prehistoric capabilities. These weren't primitive people randomly piling up dirt. These were sophisticated engineers working with principles that wouldn't be codified in Western science for centuries. Consider the hydraulic engineering at Poverty Point. Recent hydrological analysis has revealed that the concentric ridges weren't just ceremonial features. They functioned as a massive water management system that controlled drainage across the entire site, while creating microclimates that enhanced agricultural productivity. The spacing between ridges corresponds to optimal water flow calculations that modern engineers use for flood control projects. The builders understood concepts like hydraulic gradient, infiltration rates, and runoff coefficients without having names for these principles. They implemented solutions through empirical observation and systematic experimentation that produced results matching theoretical calculations developed thousands of years later. At Cahokia, ground-penetrating radar has revealed a sophisticated underground drainage network that channels water away from Monk's Mound's core structure. The system includes collection channels, distribution networks, and overflow mechanisms that prevent water accumulation while maintaining structural stability. This represents engineering foresight that planned for environmental stresses across geological timescales. The mathematical precision encoded in these drainage systems becomes apparent when you analyze the geometric relationships between different components. Channel gradients, basin capacities, and flow distribution patterns follow mathematical ratios that optimize system performance while minimizing maintenance requirements. This level of engineering sophistication required advanced understanding of hydraulic principles and mathematical relationships. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of these achievements is how they integrated engineering solutions with cultural and spiritual beliefs. The drainage channels at major earthwork sites often align with astronomical phenomena or incorporate symbolic elements that connected practical infrastructure to cosmic forces and religious practices. At Newark, the Great Circle's drainage system includes features that align with lunar standstill positions, creating infrastructure that functioned simultaneously as flood control and astronomical observatory. Water flow patterns during specific seasonal conditions created visual effects that enhanced the site's ceremonial functions while maintaining its practical utility. This integration of engineering with spirituality reveals worldviews that understood no separation between technical and sacred knowledge. Every aspect of construction carried symbolic meaning that connected human activities to larger cosmic patterns, while solving practical problems through sophisticated technical solutions. The metallurgical achievements associated with earthwork cultures demonstrate technical capabilities that rival any ancient tradition. Recent analysis of copper artifacts from Hopewell sites has revealed alloy compositions and working techniques that required sophisticated understanding of metal properties and thermal management. Craftsmen developed heating methods that could achieve temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius using only wood-fired furnaces and natural draft techniques. They understood annealing processes that controlled metal hardness and developed joining methods that created complex multi-component objects without modern welding or brazing technologies. The copper working traditions weren't limited to simple ornamental objects. Archaeological evidence shows that earthwork metallurgists produce tools, weapons, and structural components that demonstrate advanced understanding of materials engineering. They developed standardized alloy formulations for specific applications, while maintaining quality control standards that ensured consistent results across multiple production centers. The raw copper for these industries traveled over 1,000 miles from source deposits near Lake Superior to workshops in the southeast. This required trade relationships and transportation networks that maintained peaceful exchange across cultural boundaries for centuries. The logistics involved in moving heavy metal ingots through wilderness areas using only human transportation demonstrates organizational capabilities that rival modern supply chain management. Archaeological investigation of copper working sites has revealed evidence of specialized training programs and formal apprenticeship systems that transmitted metallurgical knowledge across generations. Workshop areas show clear evidence of master craftsmen working alongside apprentices in structured learning environments that preserve technical expertise while encouraging innovation and artistic development. The artistic achievements produced through these metallurgical traditions rank among the finest expressions of human creativity. Copper plates from Itawa and Spiro sites display iconographic programs of extraordinary complexity that encode mythological narratives, astronomical observations, and political symbolism in visual forms designed to communicate across cultural boundaries. Recent analysis of these artistic traditions has revealed sophisticated symbolic systems that functioned as communication technologies for transmitting complex cultural information. Understanding these iconographic programs provides insights into knowledge preservation methods that sustained complex societies across centuries of cultural development. The shell carving traditions associated with earthwork cultures achieved even higher levels of artistic sophistication. Craftsmen working with marine shells created engravings that demonstrate complete mastery of design principles and technical execution. The level of detail achieved in these carvings rivals anything produced by contemporary civilizations anywhere in the world. The technical challenges involved in shell carving become apparent when you examine the tools and techniques available to ancient artisans. Working with brittle marine shells using only stone tools and natural abrasives required extraordinary skill and patience. The fact that craftsmen achieve such remarkable results under these constraints demonstrates technical mastery that few modern artisans could match. Archaeological analysis of shell carving workshops has revealed evidence of specialized tool production and technique development that supported these artistic achievements. Craftsmen developed standardized engraving tools, polishing compounds, and quality control methods that ensured consistent results while allowing for individual artistic expression. The raw materials for shell carving traveled incredible distances through trade networks that connected earthwork centers to coastal resource areas. Marine shells from the Gulf of Mexico reached craft workshops in Ohio and Illinois through river systems and overland routes that spanned thousands of miles. These trade relationships represented more than simple commercial exchanges. They involved diplomatic arrangements, cultural protocols, and mutual obligations that maintained peaceful cooperation across diverse communities. The fact that exotic materials moved freely through these networks for centuries indicates political institutions that successfully prevented conflicts while encouraging cultural exchange. The artistic traditions that emerge from these craft centers reveal communication systems that connected communities across vast territories while preserving local cultural identities. Stylistic similarities in artwork from sites separated by thousands of miles indicate shared symbolic vocabularies that transcended political boundaries while allowing for regional variation and innovation. Recent comparative analysis has revealed that earthwork artistic traditions influence cultural development across continental scales. Design motifs, symbolic systems, and technical innovations developed at major earthwork centers spread throughout eastern North America, carrying cultural concepts that shaped indigenous artistic traditions for centuries. The educational implications of these technical and artistic achievements suggest institutional arrangements that rival modern academic systems. Archaeological evidence indicates formal schools, specialized training programs, and knowledge preservation institutions that maintained complex technical and cultural information across generations. These educational systems weren't limited to technical instruction, but included comprehensive cultural education that integrated practical skills with astronomical knowledge, historical narratives, and spiritual beliefs. The result was educational arrangements that produced specialists who understood their roles within larger cultural and cosmic contexts. The decline of earthwork cultures around 1400 CE represents complex social transformations that challenge simple explanations. Recent archaeological investigation has revealed that different communities responded to environmental and social stresses in various ways, with some adapting successfully, while others experienced more dramatic changes. Climate data from ice cores and tree rings shows that the onset of the Little Ice Age created environmental challenges that disrupted agricultural systems throughout eastern North America. Cooler temperatures and changing precipitation patterns reduced crop yields while increasing the frequency of harvest failures that stressed food security systems. Archaeological evidence from this period shows communities implementing various adaptation strategies. Some sites show evidence of defensive construction and population consolidation that suggests increased social conflict. Others reveal changes in settlement patterns and subsistence strategies that indicate successful adaptation to new environmental conditions. But these changes didn't represent complete cultural collapse. Many earthwork communities maintained reduced populations while continuing essential cultural practices. Archaeological investigation has revealed evidence of continued construction activities, craft production, and ceremonial practices that preserved core cultural traditions while adapting to changed circumstances. The Spanish expeditions of the 16th century encountered several communities still actively using earthwork sites for ceremonial and political purposes. These historical accounts provide crucial evidence for understanding cultural continuities between prehistoric earthwork builders and historic indigenous societies. Hernando de Soto's chroniclers described elaborate ceremonies conducted on mound platforms and documented political systems that clearly descended from earlier earthwork traditions. These accounts reveal cultural practices, social arrangements, and technical knowledge that had been preserved across centuries of change and adaptation. Contemporary Native American communities maintain active connections to earthwork sites, while preserving oral traditions that explain their cultural significance. These living connections ensure that the monuments are understood not just as archaeological curiosities, but as expressions of ongoing cultural traditions that continue to evolve while maintaining ancestral roots. Modern preservation efforts combine scientific research with indigenous cultural revitalization programs that protect surviving sites while restoring traditional knowledge systems. Tribal historic preservation offices work to maintain earthwork locations while documenting cultural practices and historical narratives that illuminate their meaning and significance. The collaboration between archaeologists and tribal communities has transformed understanding of earthwork cultures while restoring indigenous perspectives that were suppressed through centuries of cultural colonization. These partnerships ensure that research respects cultural protocols while advancing scientific knowledge through integration of multiple knowledge systems. Recognition through UNESCO. World Heritage designations acknowledges the global significance of earthwork achievements while providing international protection for surviving monuments. These designations place North American earthwork traditions alongside Stonehenge, the pyramids of Giza, and other monuments recognized as outstanding examples of human cultural achievement. Scientific investigation, using increasingly sophisticated analytical techniques, continues to reveal new aspects of earthwork complexity, while providing detailed reconstructions of the societies that created these remarkable monuments. Each new discovery adds depth to our understanding of indigenous achievements while challenging assumptions about prehistoric capabilities and cultural development. The environmental management practices developed by earthwork cultures offer increasingly relevant models for sustainable development as contemporary societies confront climate change and ecological degradation. These societies demonstrated that human communities can achieve prosperity and cultural sophistication while enhancing rather than degrading the natural systems that support them. The astronomical knowledge, mathematical principles, and engineering techniques developed by earthwork builders continue to influence contemporary understanding while providing solutions to modern challenges. Their approaches to water management, soil conservation, and sustainable agriculture offer practical guidance for current environmental restoration efforts. Perhaps, most importantly, the earthwork traditions demonstrate alternative pathways to cultural complexity that achieved remarkable results through different approaches to social organization and environmental relationships. These achievements expand understanding of human potential while providing inspiration for contemporary efforts to create sustainable societies. The story of North America's lost pyramids reveals achievements that demand recognition as among humanity's greatest cultural expressions. These earthen monuments represent more than archaeological sites. They stand as testimony to human ingenuity, environmental wisdom, and cultural sophistication that continues to offer insights relevant to contemporary challenges, while honoring the remarkable achievements of the indigenous societies that created them. Indigenous societies that created them. The technological sophistication of these earthwork cultures becomes even more staggering when you consider their achievements in precision surveying across continental distances. At multiple Hopewell sites scattered throughout Ohio, archaeologists have documented geometric earthworks that maintain identical proportions despite being separated by hundreds of miles and constructed decades apart. The Great Circle at Newark measures exactly 1,200 feet in diameter. The circle at Hopewell Culture National Historical Park maintains the same precise measurements. Similar geometric relationships appear at sites across southern Ohio, all built to specifications that vary by less than a few feet across vast territories. This level of standardization required surveying techniques and mathematical knowledge that wouldn't be codified in European science for centuries. The builders developed methods for measuring large distances with remarkable accuracy using only natural materials and geometric principles. They understood concepts like triangulation and baseline measurement that allowed them to maintain consistent proportions across projects spanning multiple generations. Recent laser scanning surveys have revealed that these geometric earthworks achieve precision levels that rival modern construction standards. The circular embankments maintain perfect curves with variations of less than 2% from ideal geometry. Square enclosures show corner angles that deviate less than 1 degree from perfect right angles. This accuracy required understanding of mathematical relationships and construction techniques that challenge every assumption about prehistoric capabilities. The organizational systems that maintain these standards across such vast territories reveal political arrangements of remarkable sophistication. Communities separated by hundreds of miles somehow coordinated their construction projects according to shared specifications while maintaining local autonomy and cultural identity. This required communication networks, standardized training programs, and institutional arrangements that preserved technical knowledge across generations. Archaeological evidence suggests that master builders traveled between communities, sharing technical expertise while training local craftsmen in standardized construction methods. Workshop areas at major earthwork sites show evidence of formal instruction programs where specialized knowledge was transmitted through systematic teaching and hands-on practice. These educational arrangements ensured that essential technical information remained consistent across the entire cultural region. The astronomical observations embedded in these earthwork alignments demonstrate scientific achievements that were centuries ahead of their time in terms of precision and sophistication. At the Octagon Earthworks in Newark, recent computer modeling has confirmed that the structure tracks the Moon's complex 18.5-year orbital cycle with accuracy that exceeds the capabilities of Stonehenge by a factor of 2. These earthen pyramids represent more than just archaeological wonders. They're proof that sophisticated civilizations thrived across North America for millennia, creating engineering marvels that rival anything the ancient world produced. From Cahokia's massive urban center to Poverty Point's astronomical precision, these monuments challenge everything we thought we knew about prehistoric capabilities. The builders achieved remarkable feats of organization, mathematics, and environmental stewardship while developing sustainable societies that lasted for centuries. Their legacy reminds us that human ingenuity knows no boundaries, and perhaps most importantly, that the true history of this continent is far richer and more complex than most people ever imagined.